Okay, thank you very much indeed. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Performance Management Scrutiny Committee. My name's Claire Wild. I will be chairing the meeting today. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. And just a note for you all, it's particularly important in the council chamber that you switch off your microphone. That you switch your microphone on before speaking, otherwise those watching remotely won't hear anything at all. Okay, it's because we've got quite a lot on the agenda today as well. I think it might be a good idea just for us to go around the table so that the people who are listening can actually hear who's here. So if I go to the left, start with Tom.
Hi, Tom Dodds, I'm the Council Scrutiny Manager.
Amanda Holyoak, Committee Officer for the committee.
Councillor Kirsty Hurst-Knight, Portfolio Holder for Children and Education.
Good morning, Tanya Miles, Executive Director for People, Shropshire Council.
Good morning, Sonia Miller, Assistant Director for Children's Social Care and Safeguarding.
Good morning, Denissa Gray, Service Manager, Stepping Stones.
Good morning, everyone. Chris Westwood, Customer Services Manager.
Good morning, Nigel Newman, Head of Communications and Engagement for the Council.
Councillor Gwilym Butler, Portfolio Holder for Finance and Corporate Resources.
Hello, James Walton, Executive Director of Resources and the Council Section 151 Officer.
Good morning, Helen Watkinson, Head of Improvement, Shropshire Council.
Councillor Rob, Portfolio Holder for Culture and Digital.
Peggy Mullock, Chairs. God, people scrutiny, couldn't get it.
Councillor Joyce Farrow, Chair of Place Overview Scrutiny Committee.
Alan Mosley, Councillor Force, Castlefield and Detherington in Shrewsbury.
David Vansma, Councillor for Underdale and Shrewsbury.
Roger Evans, Member, Councillor for the Longdon Division.
Royal Croft, Member for Market Drayton East and Deputy Cultural and Digital.
Councillor Chris Schofield, Oswestry East.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Item number 1 is apologies. Rob Macy has sent his apologies in, so Roy Allcroft is substituting. Item number 2 is disclosable interests, and Councillor Allcroft is Deputy Portfolio Holder for Digital, so he will be leaving the room for that particular item. So I just thought I'd note that and have it on tape. Item number 3 is the minutes from the last meeting. I shall propose those from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Joyce is seconding. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Item number 4 is public questions. There's none being received. Item number 5 is member questions, none received. And item number 6, performance report for children's social care. So I think what we're going to do is, does the portfolio holder want to just give a brief overview, or are we going to let Sonia just start? Sonia. Pass over to Sonia, and then Kirsty can come in a bit later. Okay, over to you, Sonia.
Thank you very much, Chair. So hopefully committee received the report last week. I've prepared a few slides just focusing on the data side of things, just to walk you through a very so try and summarise the report, and I'm going to expect to be in a position to sort of like take questions particularly in relation to this. So you'll be aware that last summer we came to Performance Committee in relation to 4 particular areas of children's services performance, and we were asked to return early this year to look at the children looked after numbers in a bit more detail, and so that's the purpose of the report. Obviously, members, Cabinet and members of the Council more widely are concerned about the increase in the numbers of looked after children over the last 3 years. So in the 1st of April 2020, as we went into COVID, we had 399 children who were in the care of Shropshire and as of the 20th of February, we've got 664, so that is a considerable increase. The numbers do go up day to day, and so, you know, that's only ever a moment in time number. That's not out of step with national, and there has been an increase through COVID of children being open to social care nationally, increase in child protection plans, increase in children in need, which we're not seeing in the same way, but we have seen an increase in looked after children. We are above average in relation to that increase, though, so it does need to be kind of acknowledged. I provided a breakdown of the age cohorts at the moment, and what you will see is that we've got very large 0 to 4 cohort, and that's pertinent in terms of our understanding of why we've got looked after children. Sorry, can we move the slide on? Apologies.
Who's doing the slides?
It's me, sorry.
Sorry, okay.
I moved my own on, thinking it was you.
Okay.
Nearly a third of those children are in the age group 0 to 4, and that's a real sort of area of concern for us, because there's obviously something happening there with the very young children. What I've also put into the report is a breakdown of the legal statuses of those children. So those that are currently in care proceedings, those that are subject to long-term orders. So the care order, the long-term looked after, we've got 361 of those. That's not to say they won't ever have a plan to step down or move home, but at this point in time, that's not their plan. We've got children placed for adoption. We've got children who are looked after with parental consent rather than through a court order, and children on a care order placed with parents. 84% of the children have been through court proceedings, and I think that's a really important figure. So that means that we have met the threshold that these children are being harmed so significantly that the only option we have is to go to court to get an order to keep them safe, and the court agrees with us. And I think that's a really important threshold for people to understand. So when we get into court, the child has an independent guardian who has an independent solicitor. Parents are independently represented by their own solicitor, and we are obviously legally represented by our legal services. But the threshold for proceedings is extremely high, and for you to prove an evidence that that child is at ongoing risk of significant harm is extremely high. And we have 84% of our children in care who the court agree need to be in care. And that was also borne out in terms of Ofsted looking at our thresholds. It's really important that we remember that as a council, we have a responsibility to safeguard children. And if a child needs to be looked after, they will be looked after. Sometimes that's for a short period, sometimes it's for a long period, sometimes it's for life. But we have a statutory responsibility to make sure that if children are being harmed, that they are then put into situations that are safe. That's probably one of the highest percentages in the country. I haven't got any comparative data, but we do know that it is a high percentage, and we don't have that many children who are Section 20, which is with parental consent. Those that are, the 110 are, approximately 70 of those, it goes up and down, are unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. Obviously, you don't take them to court to get an order. The law says that we have to look after them. And there are children with very complex disabilities where parents ask us to look after their children. We wouldn't take them to court and have a statutory order in relation to them. And there are a few families where we'll be working with them voluntarily to work with the child, work with the family, and to reunify them home. We have to, by law, work with a no order principle. So to go into court, we have to have evidence that we've considered no order being necessary. When we're in court and we're providing statements and information, we have to evidence that we have looked at what are all the alternatives other than getting a court order, and we have to evidence that quite clearly. That is set out in the Children Act 1989, and it's part of the welfare checklist. So we do look to that no order being the most pertinent outcome. If we can move the slide on for me. The looked after children by placement type, I've broken them down. You'll notice, if any of you are mathematicians, that not all of the totals add up to be the same one. That's because they are data snapshots at slightly different times. But it gives you the overall position in terms of where the vast majority of our children are. They're in short-term, long-term, and with relative and friend foster care placements. And that's where they should be, and that's where we aim to increase. Where we have got the challenge is the 53 children that are in external residential. A number of those should not be in residential, they should be in foster care placements. There's a national shortage of them, and we haven't got enough foster carers, and you'll be aware that's why we've had the increase in funding for foster care, for foster carers, and that we're doing a really significant campaign to increase our foster care foster carers who are approved, and particularly in relation to our own internal foster carers rather than external foster carers. Your supported lodgings and lodgings, an alternative is at 82. That includes your unaccompanied asylum seeking children population that are post 16. So that's why there's quite a large contingent there. Obviously, the most important part for us is the starts and ceases. Children who come into care, what's their plan? How do we move that plan forward? How do we make sure that they're in the right place permanently? And if at all possible, how do we get them home? Sorry, can you move that slide for me?
Sorry.
And we constantly look at that. So there is a statutory process whereby the independent reviewing officer reviews that care plan on a regular basis at 3 months and then at 6 month intervals. But obviously we continuously review children's care plans. Ideally, we get as many home as possible because we do know that research tells us that that is the best place for them if we can make it safe enough. If they're in residential, we look to see whether or not they can be stepped down to foster care. And sometimes they exit through becoming sort of 18. In 2022-23, to the end of quarter 3, 165 children have started to become looked after and 104 have exited care. The 165 includes 73 unaccompanied asylum-seeking children that we have no option to take under the mandatory scheme. And so this year to date, we have actually, to the end of quarter 3, exited more children than we've taken into care by the end of quarter 3. That's a massive step forward throughout COVID, because obviously trying to progress plans during COVID was a real challenge. And there were delays in the court proceedings, there were delays in accessing resources to get family support, etc. A key element of that has been the first, and we're into the second year of Stepping Stones being operational. So my colleague Danessa Gray is with me and will be able to answer any questions in relation to Stepping Stones. But the first phase of Stepping Stones was very effective this year, last year into 21-22, and this year it's continued to be highly effective, and it's worked with 98 children to either prevent them coming into care or enabling them to step down out of care. And this has resulted in us starting to see the stabilisation of the increase of children becoming looked after. We've remained at just above or below 660 for about 6-7 months of this year, and that includes with the increase of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. Stepping Stones activity, if the next slide please, is broken down here, so you can see where their activity is looking at. The avoidance of higher cost placements, there have been 5 of those. Avoiding children actually becoming looked after, there's been 49. They've moved 1 child onto independent accommodation successfully. They've stabilised 4 placements to stop them escalating into residential. We've reunified 36 children back to families, and they've stepped 3 down from residential to either foster care or home, and that's the total of 98 to date. There are a number of ways that children can exit care and be stop becoming looked after. One, obviously, is they become 18. The care order is discharged by the court following an application by either the local authority or a parent. That the court makes a special guardianship order, which then they don't have to continue to be a looked after child, but we do continue to pay financial support to that extended family carer, or the child is adopted. So this data, it's included in the report, shows that we've got 18 that are becoming 18 next year, and we've got a number of those that are placed with parents. Now that's an area that we're really targeting at the moment. So we've got dedicated social workers working with those families to progress those plans, to get those applications into court, to get those court orders revoked. During COVID, when a lot of the support services weren't available, a number of care orders were made by the court to make sure that that support was then given when it came back online. So we have got a fair number of those children that we are trying to progress and exit those plans from stop them becoming looked after. We've got, I can't read the figure, so those that are on interim care orders at the moment, this is a breakdown of the placement with parents. So we've got 18 children placed with parents at the moment where the court hasn't decided what it's going to do, whether they're going to come into care or whether they're going to stay with their parents. We've got 16 children who have not yet been placed for 12 months. Our local court has a slightly strange approach that we can't take those children back before the order's been in place for 12 months. Some areas you can take them back at 6 months, 9 months, etc. We're not able to. We've got 12 active discharges where the statements are being written and to take them to court. And there are 24 of those children whose plans for discharge are in progress and the assessments are being completed. So we have to do a full reassessment of those parents to evidence that it is safe to take that care order back to court. And we've got 10 children where at the moment it's just not the right time for us to look at that, and we will keep that under review. The other way of exiting children is special guardianship orders, and we've got 3 ways with legal waiting to be applications to be made. 13 are in assessment. They take between 16 to 24 weeks to complete, and 4 in the early stages of converting from a full care order to a special guardianship order. We've got 14 more of those that are projected to commence and to progress within the next 12 months. And obviously adoption is an exit from care. We've got 7 children who are currently placed for adoption waiting for their application and their final order. And we have a plan for adoption that is, there are 35 children who have a plan for adoption who are waiting to be matched or progressed to move. That means that we have got plans in place for 132 children to exit care in the next 12 months. We've got a number of plans that are in place to try and look at the reasons why our children become looked after, and we've had such a significant increase. So during the sort of 2 to 3 years of COVID, we did an awful lot of auditing work, looking at the data, looking at the trajectories, breaking down the cohorts to understand where those children were coming in. And at the beginning of the presentation, I referred to the increase in 0 to 4 children. So a number of audits were undertaken, and what we found from those audits were that some of those, particularly the younger children that were becoming straight into looked after through non-accidental injuries, serious harm and neglect, for some reason they were bypassing the early help offer. They weren't having the opportunity to have the early help support, and so there are a number of steps that are being projects that are in place to try and address that through the early help offer. It's really important that we do catch families early to try and make sure that that help is available to them at the earliest opportunity. So one of those projects is a Compass and Help and Support team, so that when families are asking for help and support at a lower level, that help and support happens within the next sort of 24 hours, and they're able to have a conversation with a family support worker, get the immediate help and support, be supported to access the right help and support for them at the earliest opportunity. That's a pilot that's been in place since the end of September of last year, and it is a very small team of family support workers based alongside Compass, which is the front door for children's services, and they respond to children who are in urgent need of some of that practical support. The early indications are that that's having a really significant effect. Obviously, we won't know yet what the long-term impact of that project is, but it is diverting families away from needing to come in and be assessed. It's too early to say to you there are any definitive outcomes from that at the moment. What we're seeing is a reduction in children needing social care assessments under the statutory framework. That is a definite, but what the kind of longer term impact of that is, we'll have to keep you under review. We've got a lot of work happening around practice development and pre-court work, and when children do come in and they go onto a child protection plan, how do we intensify that work? How do we work more closely with the parents? How do we try and resolve those issues of significant concern. If a child is on a child protection plan, they've reached a threshold of significant harm. And again, that's a statutory intervention, and it requires statutory kind of processes to be followed. But we use that opportunity to try and work with them to divert them away from court. And that's a lot of the work that Stepping Stones does. The Stepping Stones project was given the original funding sort of 3 years ago, just before COVID. It took a year to get it up and running because of COVID. And now we've had that additional upscale money. So we're trebling the size of Stepping Stones at the moment. Those staff have been appointed, most of them are in post. It will be a complete team by the 1st of April. And by trebling that size, we're able to have much more directed resource at particular cohorts of children. So there's a hub that will be working with 0 to 4s, 0 to 5s, those families, particularly where children have previously been removed from those parents. There's a hub that will be working with those that are already looked after and need to step down. And there's a hub that will be working with those children at risk of coming into care. So each of those hubs works with a multidisciplinary team, and we put the right intensive support into those families. We've got an internal residential provision that's been developed over the last 3 years, and that's now giving us a through flow of children and young people. And the point of that is that we've repurposed Chalmaran, and Chalmaran will be working with children short to medium term with a view to getting them home, so that we've got that dedicated resource that works alongside Havenbrook, which is short breaks. And again, that resource will be there to support families in the longer term. And in November 2022, agreement was given to significantly increase the foster carer allowances, and we're obviously targeting recruiting those, and the campaign went live in January, and we've had a very positive initial response to that. Next slide, please. Public Health are leading the way with the early help agenda, and I think it's really important to recognise the partnership working that's happening there. So they're really driving the prevention agenda and developed a really clear vision for early help as a universal offer across the council and across our partnership agencies. And it's important to remember that early help is a partnership. It's not just the council's responsibility to provide that. Police, health services, education services also have a responsibility to be part of that early help agenda, and that's what's being promoted. They've got a clear vision for this. It's part of the Shropshire plan, and they've got a clear vision for this to sort of develop an all-age prevention strategy. And in 2023, you'll see Public Health really kind of share much more detail and information about that. They've really focused on a pilot programme in the last 9 months, and that's being started. It's a test and learn site up in the northwest of the county, based in Shrewsbury. Can we move to the next slide, please? And it's one of a number of projects that they're leading on in terms of trying to ensure that help is part of that really broad offer. It's a collaborative work across health and care, and is targeted at those children that are sort of under the age of 4. The same group that we're concerned about in terms of the number of those that are coming in. And it's been very successful in engaging the community in a community collaborative, but also the partnership working. And there is a second site due to go live by Easter in the Shrewsbury area. They've also got a number of other projects, the 1,001 best start for children and young people, ensuring that parents are aware of the need to really meet children's needs in that first 1,001 days. The Compass project that I've already described is part of that, and Stepping Stones is also part of that. So there's a whole suite of offers that we're being developed to make sure that that early help offer is really being developed and driven. The challenge with that is the time that it takes to grow, develop, and to actually be able to demonstrate an impact. The test and learn site in Shrewsbury is showing some really early signs of being really positive, but again, it's too early to say that it's having a definitive impact on the number of children that are being referred into us. Sorry, can you move that forward? Apologies. Yep. Okay. The second part of the report has an update on social worker recruitment. So I just wonder, Chair, do you want to take questions on the kind of first looked after children before we move on to the social worker
Please,
update?
yeah. So I want to ask a few questions. So First of all, in the performance data somewhere, and I've just had a look for it and I can't find it, Shropshire have, I think, 104 looked after kids per 10,000 of the population, and the national average is about 80. I can't see where that is, Helen. Perhaps if you tell us where that is, because it's later on. But the bit, pardon? Oh, is it in the report? Sorry, I knew I'd read it somewhere. I was looking in the wrong place. So the bit that interests me, and I don't know if you know the answer, so the 0 to 4s, because obviously that's COVID related. So before COVID, what were the 0 to 4 numbers?
They were high for Shropshire, but they were and I think the acceleration is COVID related. My hypothesis, Chair, is that the early help system and agenda wasn't particularly robust, and obviously there have been significant changes in the previous 5 years. A number of local authorities took out short starts, etc. There was some of those changes, and that's up to a number of local authorities.
Yeah, so that wasn't really what I was getting at.
But what I'm saying is that the point fours isn't just about COVID. The acceleration was about COVID, but in October 2019, when I took that post, we had a high number of reports.
Okay. Because what's been previously said is, of course, during lockdown, people couldn't access for help with the youngsters, you know, the hospital, well, the hospitals so much, or the doctors, or schools, and health visitors, yeah. So all these things, and that's what I'm trying to tease out of it all, that actually, because of all these things that happened, which aren't directly related to us, it's part of the picture, that's actually come, you know, built into the figures. And also the other bit that I wanted to ask you about, and the bit, and I asked you at the beginning if anybody from the ICS was here, because one of the things I keep banging on about is the children's mental health bit, you know, because, you know, and I suppose it's mental health per se, because obviously when we had lockdown, parents struggled, and if they weren't accessing this health, both the adults and the children's, that's probably exacerbated the situation as well. And so that's kind of out of our control, although we are asking those questions. Because when you say, you know, you talk about your plan to reduce the numbers, then an integral part of that has to be working with the ICS to get this issue resolved. So, you know, and especially for those younger people, would you agree with that? Or what about Danessa? What do you think? Yeah, you take it first, all right, yeah. Yeah, okay.
So you're absolutely correct, without a doubt, part of the challenge through COVID. Pre-COVID, exacerbated is making sure through partnership. There was a definitive challenge around health midwifery, community-based health vision during COVID. So many of our colleagues were and those services just weren't. We really saw that in the numbers of non-accidental injury and serious injuries to babies and children. And that happened nationally, but we really saw that here in Shropshire. And you can see that decrease in the adoption numbers. The year before COVID, we did 6 adoptions in a year. This year, I think we're on target to do 30. So we've had a really significant increase in that. But cumulative impact then with parental ill health, mental health, stress, use of drug and alcohol, increased injury, COVID, etc. That cumulative impact, and then that kind of challenging access to support services for parents absolutely has been a real challenge. And I've reported in a number of committees, particularly around this situation, that we end up getting more by the court to fund therapeutic support for either children or adults to try and move the situation on for the family because it's not accessible through the health system. On Monday, we've got a health summit with our health colleagues at the ICS to actually really look at this challenge and problems, really kind of explore it. It's been led by Tanya and in partnership with the lead, the head of the ICS. But stepping stones is trying to develop a different approach to that. And I think it's the listeners talking about more disciplinary team and how we're trying to pull that together.
So there is a multidisciplinary approach within Stepping Stones, and as part of, as Sonia said, one of the hubs that we're setting up is our parenting hub. But just going back a little bit, the whole ethos of Stepping Stones is around that supporting that early approach to supporting families. So our plans going forward is to, now that we've had the upscale, is to get involved at the earliest point. So as soon as a child comes through our door, if there is scope, or if the assessment identifies that there is a need for parental support, the referral will come into Stepping Stones, and we will work with that family. And also alongside that, within the parenting hub, is supporting those assessments of parents, particularly, as Sonia said earlier, around those families that we've been involved with multiple children. So it's not just looking at what the issue is now, it's about what the experience has been for those parents in their own parenting, and trying to work with them to improve that.
So just, because I am aware of the budget position, so some of these things you're ordered to do by the courts on behalf of health, are health actually repaying the money?
Do you want to take that?
So a very good question, Chair, and one that we are in conversations with the ICS. One of the reasons why we're having the CYP Summit on Monday is to bring to life the real examples of the gaps in health provision for our children and young people in Shropshire. There's been multiple reviews done over the last 12 to 18 months. But certainly this is across Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, so it's a joint CYP Summit on Monday, for us to come out of that summit with some very firm actions about what's going to be different. We know from the Ofsted inspection this time last year, 12 months ago, that Ofsted found that children's healthcare needs were being met by the council, and in that report I quote, "It's unsustainable for the council." We've certainly been having conversations with the ICS about that position, and I can confirm that from April, the team will be invoicing the ICS for needs that we are meeting that are health, and certainly the court do order the council to put things in place because it's right for the children, but financially that's not sustainable, and for the council that's one that we are challenging.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm very interested in that. So if we've got any other questions, so Roger and then Julia and then Joyce.
Thank you, Chairman. Note the previous discussion, and a number of years ago, a previous director stated that the way to help children in Shropshire was to do early intervention, which everybody supported. I note the finance peer review, which was carried out and reported in June of last year. There's an interesting paragraph in it, which says they heard concerns about the impact of past decisions to deprioritise early support for families, which the council was now seeking to partially reverse. And I pick up the word partially as well in that. And I note in the report where it says plans in place to address the issues leading to child becoming looked after, it says in that end of that first paragraph is being developed and implemented. Can't see any identification of resources that is actually doing that. Can you illuminate and say what resources are being put in to try and address this? Because it seems to be the whole ethos of the report, the earlier we, council, health, whatever, can talk to families with young children like this, the better outcome it is for the children. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay.
So thanks, Roger. So in terms of the LGA peer review, it was a report that we commissioned for them to come in to do a benchmarking exercise in terms of Shropshire Council spend against other statistical neighbours in terms of other local authorities. And that budget book was 2021. It didn't include the increase in the early help that we know the council has provided. Likewise, the triple funding in stepping stones and the additional funding of CHAS that won't be included in that report. So in terms of our commitment to early help prevention, we know the Shropshire plan is absolutely set in stone in terms of early help prevention. We've recently had an early help independent review. That report landed a couple of weeks ago, and there will be some changes. We know from the National Care Review that the government responded to about 3 weeks ago now, that they talk very much around the support to families early doors. But this is not just about the local authorities' response to early help, as Sonia alluded to earlier. This is about the universal offer. This is about what are our health providers, education providers doing to support families early. It's not just about the council's offer to early help. But in terms of the early help offer, we know that we significantly increased the early help and youth provision to the council 18 months ago, tripled the funding with stepping stones. We've now got a full team that will be in place from the 1st of April. And then the exciting CHAS work that Sonia referred to earlier, which is working with families, having those really important conversations early on. So to be able to speak to the family and go out to them in 24 hours is unique. And that is preventing those families going through quite an onerous social work assessment that nobody particularly wants, but to have a conversation and divert is already seeing some really positive examples here in Shropshire.
Okay.
If I can.
Yep, Roger.
It's just a time scale. And when you say triple, what does that actually mean? If we only spend very little now, you triple it, and it could still be very little. So is there any time scales on this? Because, as I say, and I go on the peer review, it says the council was now seeking to partially reverse. So it's the council decisions on spending in early help, which is referred to there. So notwithstanding health and other partner agencies, it's Shropshire Council that made the decision sometime in the past to reduce the expenditure, to deprioritise this, and we're now, I would say, reaping the results of this and the children, so that we're seeking to actually reprioritise it. But how much effort are we putting in? Do we as a scrutiny committee need to identify that more we put in? Do we need to identify the timescale and bring that timescale forward? So that's where I'm coming from on this question.
Yeah, and can I just say, Roger, part of this is, I think, the council working with our, the ICS and our other partners as well, because with the best will in the world, we can't do it on our own, and we do need a cohesive plan.
If I can, Chairman, completely agree with that. But the peer review identified that Shropshire Council made a decision previously, and I'm not saying anybody here around this table was part of it, but the council made a decision to deprioritise it, and now we're increasing it back. And I'm just asking for some extra background on what Shropshire Council is doing to bring it back to maybe the level it was before, increase it, to try and address this problem.
Okay. Tanya or Sonia?
Yeah, right. Okay, we're talking off my head here, so I'm hoping my memory is going to serve me very well. So my understanding about 18 months ago was we've put just over £1 million into the targeted early help offer and the youth work offer, and that all of that is up and running and in place, and that's been part of the review, that's the independent review that's undertaken to say, are we using that in the best possible way? Are we having the impact that we need to do? And it has identified some recommendations for, sort of developing the way that we deliver some of those services. Public Health have put in a considerable amount of money into both the Test and Learn site, but also there is just short of £500,000 gone into the CHAST team at the front door. So that's up and running and in progress. The first phase of Stepping Stones, which was the original project that was agreed, was just short of, I think it was 2.7 million over 3 years, and it is that's been trebled. So actually, starting from September for 3 years, I think it's just over 4 million. James might be able to look it up actually and give me a bit more of an exit accurate. So, but we trebled that considerably to enable that to deliver to a much wider range of families, and that is a spend to save initiative. So what we've got to clearly do is identify that whilst that is benefiting children and young people at an earlier opportunity, it's actually having a cost reduction impact, particularly in relation to residential placements. So that's actually a spend to save initiative in terms of the longevity of that programme. We will re-benchmark that as soon as next year's budget figures or budget book is available nationally against our statistical neighbours and see whether or not that brings us below, in line or above, etc. But I think for me, realistically, your observations are accurate, and I think that a vast number of local authorities nationally took money out of early help because at that point in time there was very little evidential research to say that it actually was a deterrent and a diversionary factor. Shropshire wasn't the only local authority did it, the vast majority of them did, and the vast majority have ended up putting that back in as the research evidence has become much clearer that it does have the long-term impact. To be honest, what we're doing is what we need to be doing, and I am confident that we will start to turn this curve with families and we will start to pick them up much earlier. You could put any amount of money into it at our end, but you're only feeding the statutory beast. The solution is the wider system, and we can continue to feed the statutory beast, and that's our statutory responsibility, but the solution is in engaging nurseries, schools, health, education, community voluntary sectors, so that these families get the support long before there's even a problem. And a lot of families that never need social care support or never need intervention are families who know how to do that themselves. They've grown up in families that know how to do that themselves. They have extended family that support as well. We need to enable our families to engage in help and support at the earliest opportunity. That is the long-term solution. You could put 15, 20, 25, 30 million in at my end and we'll spend it. But until you actually get that front end right, which is the partnership end, the statutory function will pick up the pieces because that's what it's there for. It's a safety net. So I don't disagree with you, but I do think it is not taking our eye off. It's not just about the money that the local authority puts in. It is very much about putting our efforts into really strengthening that early intervention, that community response to children. There is a lot of truth in the phrase, it takes a village or a community to raise a child, not just a family. I think that the investment that we have had has been considerable. On top of actually what I've talked about, you've then got the investment in the foster carer fees as well. Has been considerable, and the next 12 months we really need to see the impact of that turning the curve with those children who are on the edge of care, but it has to be done in parallel alongside our partner agencies to turn the curve before they even get to us.
Okay, Roger, I've got quite a few people to ask us. Yeah, Julia.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to help you by showing the graph that you were looking for earlier, which shows the rates for Shropshire compared to regional, national and statistical neighbours. So yes, we were on average in the top end pre-COVID. We then escalated during COVID at a rate of escalation considerably higher than anyone else, including the yellow statistical neighbours. So COVID happened to everybody. Sure start closures unfortunately happened largely across the country. Lots of Conservative councils reduced early help. help. So the real question, I think you have actually given us quite a few answers today. I really appreciate the detail and knowledge in your answers. The real question is, why is Shropshire an outlier? What is it that's specific to our area that means our looked after rate is so exponentially high compared to statistical neighbours? What I'm hearing is that the provision from the health providers and other primary services isn't of the level that we would like, and that the early help needs to be reverted. If my colleague Kevin Pardy could join us today, he would ask questions about the rurality question, which ought to put us on the same as the yellow line. But his view, and he raised it at the time, is that closure of rural hubs meant that communities, isolated communities, became too far from services to be under anybody's eyes. So they fell off the monitoring scheme. You may remember 6-9 months ago when we were talking about COVID and talking about health visitors not having eyes on children for 2 years, I asked for a list to understand what is the number of children in Shropshire who have never seen a health visitor. I wanted to know what is the number, how many kids are we talking about, and what is the plan for a health visitor to see them. I never got an answer to that question, and we still need to know the answer, because next year we might be talking about 0 to 4, the year after I might be talking 0 to 3. Is there still thousands of children in this county who have never seen a health professional? Because, and that's really my final question, I think we need to be a lot clearer about the definition of early help, because today you use the word universal early help. I'm a governor at a primary school. When we talk about early help, we're talking about identifying families to target support for them because they need it. Are you saying there are 2 types of early help? I understand universal provision as a primary care, so a check of every child, a safe and well check of every child from a health visitor, you know, weight, checking for bruises, checking how the family are getting on, and of those, a subset might end up needing what I would call targeted early help. So can you just clarify that for me to help me understand? Because the bit I'm worrying about, I think the bit we're all worrying about, is that universal eyes on monitoring of these very young children. And if that's our partners, if that's the health service, then let's put the pressure on them. Let's print this front and foremost on every report, which brings my final comment. The purpose of this committee is to monitor performance and flag issues. How can this report be green RAG rated? If you look on our performance portal, this looked after children rate is green. When you look further on, we'll have our performance statistics presented to us. It's green. How can that not be red? How isn't that an exception reporting? Why isn't that the number 1 in our performance portal? Either the performance portal isn't working properly, or we're not using it correctly, or I've missed an episode somewhere. Thank you.
I'm quite happy to take the response to all of those. If I start with that one, Julia, I think it's really important that the council understands that having a target that you RAG rate in relation to looked after children is fundamentally, morally, ethically, and wrong. And it is not appropriate. And as an Assistant Director of Children's Social Care, I would really urge you not to do that. We have to be a council who looks after children who are being significantly harmed. And what I've described today is that 84% of our children have been before the court in this country and had the level of harm that is being concerned. What I would suggest is that you're concerned about the level of harm that parents are inflicting on their children, and that we are having to be the response to that as a council. So it's rated green fundamentally because it's not a target. And it's rated green from my perspective and through my accountability to my director and my portfolio holder, that we know and understand that looked after population. I've given you very detailed information about the numbers of children, plans, exits, etc., what we're doing to address it. So it is a challenge for Shropshire, there is no doubt about it. This time next year, we may end up with 1,000 children looked after. We may end up with 200. It is very difficult to predict, because what you don't know is how many parents and children are going to continue to harm their children. In terms of the early help offer, Universal is essentially a service that any family in Shropshire can access. So that's why it's called universal, and it is slightly different to targeted, which is exactly what you defined. So a targeted early help offer is where somebody has referred a family in for something a bit more specific, and then we run our own targeted early help. So health visiting, nursery schools, the education provision of primary school, secondary school, community-based provision that's run by voluntary sector is part of a universal offer within the community. And that is a really important part, because that's where you get your first level of eyes on. And the stronger that universal offer is, and the more that brings together, the earlier you get the eyes on that child. Yeah.
Can I just come in there? So, I mean, I think it's how you interpret a lot of this. So if you look at the other chart, the list of referrals for Shropshire, we've got one of the lowest list of referrals. And I think the Ofsted people said that was because we were dealing with the issues. So I think you need to take a balanced approach to it. Yes, we have an issue, but it's our issue. But we are obviously looking after our kids really well, because we've got the lowest referrals in the country. So that's the other side of it. So I think, you need to have a bit of balance in the whole thing.
I agree. And I think that the COVID rise for us, I think is complex. And I think the other county councils, so those statistical neighbours are about the West Midlands average and the England average, etc. So, for example, Dudley, Walsall, Sandwell were able to keep all of their early help offer open through COVID. So we weren't. It just wasn't practical within Shropshire, because a lot of the staff were redeployed, the rurality issue, the hubs, etc. So comparing a rural county of our nature to the West Midlands or like the England average is difficult. So most of the county councils that we are comparable to within that neighbourhood group, so Cornwall, Devon, Gloucestershire, Herefordshire, etc., are also within that band of high increase of looked after children and above England average. And I think that we were disproportionately affected by those services not being available and the slow speed in which they came back online. So in other local authorities that were able to get the health visiting back online, and the midwifery services, community midwifery services back online, nursery nurses back online, etc., much sort of quicker. I mean, that's me having a bit of a hypothesis there. I've got no kind of data evidence behind that. In terms of thinking about our health visitors, I've brought that as a concern to committees over the last 2 years. We've done a lot of auditing work, both at my front door. We've audited child protection plans, referrals. We've worked with public health and the health visiting services to do a series of audits. And what we have ascertained is that children are being seen. What we've ascertained through a lot of that work that's now been done jointly is that when children are on a child protection plan, they get an excellent targeted health visiting service. There is no doubt about that. And that the health visiting service is able to confirm that it's well into the 90%. I don't want to give you any more of an accurate answer to that, but it's well into 90% of children are being seen for their first and second visits and their statutory health visitor checks. And that they are back face to face, either clinic or within the family home. And any family of concern, those are home visits. And that's been a very effective piece of joint work between Jeanette Hill, my service manager at the front door, and the service managers within public health and the commissioners and the health visitors. And there's a whole piece of work being done around the Brighter Futures Network, which is around bringing those early health professionals together with early help and social care professionals to work much more closely around that kind of early intervention in the first 1,000 days of a child's life. So we can give you that assurance that health visitors are seeing children face to face.
Okay, thank you.
So why did our council redeploy staff away from these fundamental services when other councils didn't?
We didn't. I think what Sonia's referring to there is in terms of health diverted their resources to the vaccination hubs.
Why is that an outlier? So the vaccines were going on all over the country.
Not every system diverted their health resources. This system took the decision to divert the majority of their health services, to health staff to vaccination, but not every system did that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Joyce, thank you for being very patient. I've got Joyce, David Vasma, and then Alan.
Thank you. For as long as I've been on the council, I think every year we hear that we're struggling to get foster carers. What are we doing now to try and attract them? Are we trying to bring people who were fostering and gone out of the system back in? Or do we just let them go when they go? And the cost of living crisis, you said there's been uplift in pay for foster carers. Does that take that into consideration? Because obviously the burden well, it's not a burden, it's a pleasure, I'm sure, having these children, but the burden of the cost of looking after these children has shot up over the last couple of years. And I do know that we are competing with other authorities. Thank you.
So, yeah, we've really struggled over the last, I'd say, 5+ years in terms of being able to recruit as many foster carers that have left. We've had quite a sort of number of foster carers who have reached retirement age and who have taken that decision to retire. Part of the challenge for us was that we were paying very low rates to foster carers, and back in the autumn, we did a paper that went to Cabinet, and it was agreed that our fostering fees and allowances would be completely reviewed, and we're now slightly above Telford and Wrekin, and that puts us within the top 2 within the region in terms of what we now pay our foster carers from the 1st of April this year. We do have cost of living increases on fostering allowances each year, and that's supported by the Foster Carers Association and then the National Fostering Association. So they kind of give a suggested fee, and that is included in a sort of budget increase. That hasn't happened this financial year because obviously we've had this very large, significant increase. The vast majority of fostering families have seen their fostering allowances trebled. So it is a really significant investment into fostering. And then as of next financial year, we will build in the cost of living exactly the same as we do with anything else that we provide as a service. Moving forward, so we've relaunched the fostering campaign in January. We're targeting a number of areas, so where we've got children already placed with foster carers who aren't ours, we're seeing if we can convert some of those. Foster carers who may want to return to fostering, there aren't many of those, they tend not to leave. But also obviously new families and new carers and a whole range of those kind of families, because it doesn't have to be just families, it can be single carers, etc. So we've had January's figures are through, and we're tracking those on a week-by-week basis. We had 26 inquiries in January, which is more than we had all of last year, and we've had 5 go through to initial inquiries, beyond inquiries into assessment. And again, that's a really significant number for a conversion rate in the first sort of month. So we'll continue to kind of track that. But again, it is on the back of that investment into those fostering fees and allowances. In particular, we've invested in really increasing the fees that go with a child who is particularly complex and has particular behaviours that challenge. Particularly, we've got a number of young children in residential, and we want to find them foster families, and that rate is highly competitive and comparable to enable foster carers to be able to provide the care and the creativity and the activities and the kind of support that they will need as foster carers to look after those children.
So how long does it take to train up foster carers?
It's a minimum of 6 months from assessment, from the point of first inquiry to the point of getting to panel. It takes a minimum of 6 months. So it is going to be quite challenging next year, because obviously that investment's happening now. Yeah. But obviously I'm not going to see the fruit of that until at least June. In terms of those that we're putting through now. That's set out in regulation and legislation. It's not something I can speed up. It's not something I can make a difference about. There are very clear set stages that you have to follow within the rep fostering regulations.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Sonia. Right, Joyce, yep, David Vasmer.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. There's a couple of things I want to raise. One is to do with the training of social workers, and I appreciate the work that's being done in terms of the agency work conversion and the social work apprentices. But there's in the report, there's page 11, there's a section dealing with the exit interviews with social workers leaving, and one of the issues they raised there is the training and the fact they were leaving to go elsewhere for training and then possibly coming back, I think one social worker said. And I just wondered whether, given the shortage of staff and the need for kind of skill, given the pressures that are under the need for skilled social workers, whether there is a need to look at some of the aspects of training and development to ensure that we don't lose staff in this way.
Thank you, Councillor Vasmer. We have a very broad and robust training and development offer, and within our annual health check, it's one of the reasons that social workers stay with us. Those social workers have left to go for very specific training. So one's gone to CAMS, so they want to undertake a very particular type of working with adolescents with mental health training, and their aim is to return them with that skill base. It's not a training program that I could provide clinically. It's not something that we could set up and do. It wouldn't be cost effective, and legally it needs to be delivered within a clinical psychology setting. And two others have gone to a local authority who at that point in time are running systemic training. We do run systemic training, but it's whether or not that programme, it's not something you run every year. So we run it sort of every 2 years, every 3 years. And we are due to do that, and we've got a number of social workers who are identified to be on that programme. Those social workers didn't want to wait. They wanted to go and take up that opportunity at that point in time. It's not unusual, and actually I would say it is a positive that staff move. Social workers need a very broad range of experience, and most of ours have worked in other local authorities and will go and work in other local authorities at a time. It is about trying to keep them in the profession, whether they work for us or another local authority. And you'll see in the report the number of social workers that are exiting the profession completely. That's much more of a concern. And these are people who are going to develop, grow, become better social workers, and will probably come back to us. And they've been quite clear about that. That's a positive, not a negative. And you can't hold on to every social worker all of the time. So getting specialist access to different types of social work practice is really important. So your advanced practitioner mental health training, for example, adolescent mental health training and development, particular ways of working with parents through adult sort of social care, adult mental health, adult drug and alcohol. Social workers go and get that experience because they have a particular interest, and then they bring it back to work within the children's setting.
Okay,
I think that I've lost 3 to that is minimal out of a staff team of 160.
If you come back quickly, David, because I've got Alan, and then Roger wants to ask another question, and then I'm very conscious of time.
Thanks very much for that response. And but the one other thing I'd like, just reflecting on the debate about the increased number of looked after children. I noticed in another report we've got before us today, which is on the corporate performance, you'll see that the savings achieved by Stepping Stones project, December 22, is over 4 million. I mean, I'm worried that we are not spending enough money in this area.
No.
Right. Over the years, there've been cuts to the funding in this area, which the authority have undertaken.
No, I think you've got that wrong, David. They've increased the money for Stepping Stones 3-fold.
Right.
And that's why they were achieving the savings. That's my understanding. Is that right, Sonia?
I think I've spent the last sort of 45 minutes saying that we've had a lot of investment, and the investment's been put into different areas. I think in terms of, the amount of money, it's not a bottomless pit, and money doesn't actually equal outstanding. So if you look at outstanding authorities that provide consistently good care, the vast majority of them aren't the high spenders. Your inadequate authorities are the high spenders. I think it's the quality of that provision, and it is the quality of the system, and it is the impact that that system working together that makes the difference. Yes, you need that funding, and I think that we've been given a considerable amount of funding in the last 3 years, in different ways, from the early help right the way through to the services. The major gap was us having a dedicated family support service. We've now got that. It's stepping stones. We've evidenced the impact of that within the first year, last year's figures, and it made considerably above its target savings last year. I think it was quadruple its target last year. We got the evidence. The council then supported us in trebling that, and we're on target to over-deliver on this year's savings so that we can evidence that that's kind of happening. So from my perspective, I've got the resources I need. I just need the time for them to start to have the impact on the children that we've already got in care. What Claire, as chair, has really eloquently articulated is that I can't influence those that have yet to come into care. I can only influence those that once they come to our attention, and the wider system has to step up and address those issues of families that need support before it becomes the point where they hurt their children. Because that's what we're talking about, you know. Children only come to my attention when they're being harmed physically, emotionally, or through neglect. We've already reached the point of harm by the time they come to my service, and the system has got to respond and step up and get to them before they hurt their children.
Okay, right, so I've got Alan, and then a quick last question from Roger. Alan.
Yeah, I thank the officers for that report, and clearly some good work is now being made to set things right, because the statistics that we've heard are pretty appalling in terms of the performance of Shropshire Council. In the past, we hope it's in the past, and that the record will find a better route in future. But I'd like to ask the portfolio holder, because we've heard from officers, I'd like to hear from the decision makers and the person who is supposedly in charge of the operation, whether she would like to apologise for the failings of the council that's resulted in this disparity in terms of statistics, that's no doubt led to numbers of children being looked after, whereas it might have not been, they might not have been if proper attention was in place, as we've heard. And we ought to do this because we know of the pretty difficult outcomes for many of these children as a consequence of what Shropshire Council's record. I would also like to ask the portfolio to be quite clear about what priorities she sees for the department moving forward, and how she's going to drive the sort of changes both within the department and with external agencies also going forward into the future.
Okay, Alan, I think the first part of your question was out of order, and so I don't propose to ask Kirsty to answer that.
Why is it out of order, Chair?
But because you're asking
the council to take some responsibility for the record that is pretty poor, however, whatever gloss you like to put on it.
Right, okay, I'm chairing the meeting, so if you just speak when
I'm challenging what you're saying.
I am not. None of us here are going to apologise, because we work, and I know the officers do work very hard to protect our children. We're not apologising because nobody has done anything wrong. I mean, the hours that these people work and the things they have to face, I think it's appalling that you're asking somebody to apologise when we're actually, what we should be doing is saying thank you to Sonia and Danessa and Tanya and her team and Kirsty for all the things that they do to try and protect our children. So I don't propose to allow you to ask Kirsty that bit. If you want to answer the second bit, you can. Otherwise, we'll carry on and ask Roger.
Happy to. Initially, I've got points here that have already been covered. I think the main thing for me as portfolio holder over the last 2 years is the drive, the ambition, the dedication and the vision that these people next to me have performed. When I go to regional meetings, people are excited about stepping stones and what that might be, the therapeutic hubs, the way that it's split for your families, the different age groups. This is visionary work and it's essential, and we know we've got to do it, and we know where the looked after children numbers are. But children in our care are well supported and well looked after. Fact. Our residential homes are outstanding. Our social workers go above and beyond. We are working more and more with partnership agents. We are looking at just the SEND partnership boards and the different partnership boards, and working closer with our health partners, education partners, and it's that coming together, that wraparound support, that robust level of support that will ensure children in Shropshire are safe and well looked after. So I just want to commend you for what you're doing. It's hard work, but they are outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Roger, would you like to ask the last question?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chairman. Earlier, I said that we are reaping the problems that have occurred in recent years. And if one does a Google search, you can see that Shropshire Council in 2014 put Shrewsbury Children's Centres at the front and did everything they could. And then in a report in 2019, it says that the number of children accessing services at Shrewsbury fell from 4,900 in 2014-15 to 1,700 in 2019. And it goes on to say that last year, that's 2018, Shropshire Council's Cabinet agreed to reduce services from 26 different buildings to 6 in order to save £875,000. So I repeat what I said earlier on, the council made decisions which are now affecting where we are. And that's why I wanted assurance that we are now devoting the money, and I congratulate the Stepping Stones project for doing what it is doing, but that's why we are where we are. And it's 0 to 4, and if you see 2019, 2023, 4-year-olds, it's the number of sure starts, coupled with COVID, maybe, which is causing us the problem with the numbers of children which are coming in. Are there any comments that need to be made on that? Thank you, Chairman.
Sadly, I wasn't here. I've never seen that data. I came into post in October 2019, so I'm not in a position to comment in relation to that. I think, I've tried to explain today that the reasons that children come into care are complex. The Sure Start centres are definitely part of that picture. There's no doubt about that, or an equivalent. I've tried to articulate that we've had significant funding and resourcing over the last 3 years since I've been in post, through early help, through stepping stones, through a range of projects and a range of approaches. You can add in, at the moment I'm talking about looked after children here, but you can add in the funding that's gone into trees, which is our exploitation hub, etc. I think there are complicated reasons, and we can debate those till the cows come home. But my job is to look forward and to find the solutions and to put that vision in place. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's what I'm trying to articulate to you here today. To describe the performance of looked after children here as a failing is a fundamental misunderstanding of your corporate parenting responsibility. You as members are corporate parents, every single one. And we have statutory duty to make sure that children are safe from harm and that they live in safe homes, whether that be their family or not. This Children's Services has never been graded inadequate by Ofsted. It has never been graded requires improvement by Ofsted under the last 2 inspection frameworks. Ofsted very clearly articulated in a report that the service that's provided to children that were looked after in this county is good, and it does the right thing, and we've got the right children that are looked after. So to describe that system as failing children is a fundamental misunderstanding of the role of the corporate parent within the law. And I think that we have to accept that the numbers of children looked after will go up and down. How we look after them, where we look after them, and how we prevent them becoming looked after is part of the council's responsibility as a whole, not any one sector of it. It's of officers, members, the community, the partnership. There are statutory responsibilities for multi-agency partnerships. There are statutory responsibilities for police, health, education, members and officers to make sure the needs of those children are met and that children live in safe homes, whether they be at home or within the care of the local authority. And as I've said today, if we end up with 1,000 looked after children, I hope to goodness we don't, but if we do, it will be because that's where they need to be and that's where they need to be looked after, because that's what we need to do to keep them safe. My vision is, and my hope, and the direction of travel of the council, very clearly articulated in the Shropshire plan, is that we will get as many children back with their families as safely as possible. But that requires a system approach of all of the corporate parents, including members, including health, including police, including education.
And I think that is so important, Sonia. It's not just our game, it belongs to everybody. And we need to hold hands and get it sorted. Gwilym, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, it's been a very interesting conversation and I've listened to both sides. Firstly, Roger, I can actually remember the papers coming about the Sure Start centres, and one of the reasons, if I recall correctly, was, and I think it was Bash Church, there was only one person using it and it was costing us hundreds of thousands of pounds to actually keep the centre going. And by actually making that rationalisation, we were able to do the alternative investment into children's services and support the staff to what they actually think they need. Going back to this, we should be more like the average and to graphs and everything else. It'd be very interesting, you look at those graphs in isolation, it'd be very interesting to see what Ofsteds they had and to what level their performance were in looking after their children. And I personally, and I mentioned this at Cabinet when we were looking at the financial pressures on the service, and we are doing the right thing. There is nothing more, nothing less. And I remember back to when we used to look at data of domestic violence. If the data for domestic violence went up, we celebrated, because we knew what was going on. It wasn't hidden, and those people were being looked after. Now, I know the figures they can be banded politically as horrible or going out the window or everything else, but from where I'm concerned, the money is being put to our statutory responsibilities, and I can hold my head up high that I'm looking after the children in Shropshire in my role as a corporate parent, and I fully support the officers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, I think we've had enough debate on this particular item. I'd like to thank Sonia for a very good presentation. Well, I think the information in the report will suffice. I think I think it was more for information, because the bit that we actually wanted to come back was to look after children. So thank you very much indeed, and we will be looking at it again. Yes, Julie. Yeah, make a point, yeah.
We did say we would tackle the two things separately.
Yeah.
I was really interested to see this. As you know, it's one of Labour's alternative budget proposals, asking that the authority consider increasing salary of social workers, a golden handshake, but most particularly to work with partner authorities, neighbour authorities, to agree that we basically pay the same rates, so that we don't hemorrhage to immediate neighbours, but we're all lifting social workers to a higher salary. We really appreciate and commend the work you've done around the apprenticeships and around the graduates, training the people through and taking them immediately on. But obviously any team needs to have a balance of experienced social workers as well as newly recruited and trained. The thing that was of most interest was the description of one of the successful strategies was a loyalty bonus, so where social workers were rewarded with £5,000 if they commit for 2 years. To me, that is a vindication that social workers are not being paid enough. and that's only solving the problem for 2 years. If they need an extra £5,000, what happens to them at the end of the 2 years? Presumably they leave again, or they threaten to leave again, or you have to do it all over again. That's surely an indication that the base problem here is that they're not being paid enough, being valued by this authority. And it's another example of a kind of an early intervention, isn't it? Getting it right up front and at the start, rather than having to react all the way down the line. Thank you.
There's not a straightforward answer to some of that question. So the retention payment they can apply for every 2 years. We only tie them into for 2 years because we accept that social workers' lives change, people move, etc. A number of local authorities that do use a retention payment, you do it for 3 years, 5 years. Ours is 2, and they can reapply for it. It's not something that will necessarily end. We may end it at some point. The salary scales are within a relatively small margin compared to like local authorities, so it's not like there's a £10,000 or £15,000 difference, etc. I think between us and Telford and Wrekin it varies depending on which scale you look at, of less than sort of like £1,000 depending on which scale you look at, and again across the region. We were at one point the second highest payer in the region, and then obviously other local authorities have readjusted theirs and we've gone back down to about the middle. There isn't an appetite. We have taken it to the directors of children's services to say whether or not we have regional pay scales. At this point in time, there isn't an appetite for that. That's not to say that that won't happen. There's a huge amount of work being done to try and stabilise the agency market, and there's a very clear memorandum of understanding across the 14 local authorities, and we're kind of really trying to hold the line for that. All 12 of the, I think it's 12 in the report, agency social workers that have converted are experienced social workers. So that is where we are kind of really targeting that. So I completely agree, Julia. We need that balance of new versus experience. And bearing in mind, I've got qualified social work staff of about 160, between 160 and 175 at any one time. So, you know, we have got experienced social workers and newly qualified social workers, etc. There is a market forces payment that is a paper that's been done. We wrote it as children's services, and it is currently with HR and being looked at, because obviously if you do something significant for one part of a specialist area of the council, you have to consider that. So there is currently conversations and discussions going on with both adult services and the unions. So that's not to say that's not in train. It is in train, and that's a kind of market forces payment which a number of local authorities utilise to try and enable that. That's particularly important for us because of the travel aspect, and that is sort of one of our greatest challenges at the moment, and the amount of time that travel puts on to people's working day and the challenge that is. And we do know that that is a real barrier for some of our workers. So it's in train is what I would say to you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And that's really welcome, that report. And I think what's good about that is that the transparency. So having a policy which is across the piece is transparent. Having a temporary retention payment that people can apply for, I don't find it transparent. I don't find it equal across all the employees. We'll end up having to the days of single status, where how can this employee have a retention payment but that one doesn't when they're doing the same role, whereas the process you're describing is much more transparent and upfront. What we're talking about is increasing conditions across the piece to retain them. And your point about travel is what you referred to in the report, and it's the reason we shouldn't compare with Telford, because what we're asking our workers to do is different and has a different financial burden on them, and it must be factored into that pay. So I really appreciate that, and I look forward to seeing that come out of the end of the machine, that report.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So is everyone happy with the recommendations contained within the report? Move those. Yeah, everyone happy? Thank you very much indeed. I don't know if anybody's got any questions on there's some bits about adult social care in the performance report. Has anybody got any questions, or are we happy to let Tanya go? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Bye. Right, thank you very much indeed. So item number 7 is a green paper on aligning our customer services and the drive to digital. So I think Roy's going to go for a coffee. Rob, do you want to have a word before Chris? Just introduce it, and then Chris can
Yes, right. Well, I was going to introduce the report.
Yeah, okay.
And then bring Chris and Nigel in.
Okay,
Is that okay? Yeah,
Thank you,
okay.
Rob. Thank you.
So yes, the green paper is all about aligning our customer services and the drive to digital. So firstly, I'd like to stress that the proposals in this paper do not affect the times for the first point of contact for adults and children social work, homelessness, or the local welfare fund, nor do they affect contacts that might require an emergency response of out of hours, such as urgent highways issues. These will continue as normal. These changes only apply to simpler transactional service requests, such as waste, highways, planning, and registrars. Many people could do another way via our website. It is many years since the opening hours of the customer service centre was last looked at, and at that time the online offer for those service requests has expanded and improved considerably, while customer habits have also changed. There is also a general downward trend in these calls to the customer services centre, from over 200,000 calls back in 2018 to just under 180,000 calls in 2022, and this is something we need to encourage. Against this, customer services have remained open during these times that reflect more historic levels of contact. For example, there are now very few contacts at all on Saturday mornings, but the contact centre remains open on Saturday mornings. We know from research out there that encouraging our customers to do more business with us online helps to reduce the cost of handling these transactions quite significantly. So, for example, a phone call will cost Shropshire Council around about £3 a call, whereas a online transaction will cost the council around about 15 pence. The appendices to the report show that there is also a very established pattern to the volume of telephone calls over a working day, with few calls received before 9 a.m. and noticeably tailing off of calls later on during the day. But alongside reducing call numbers and encouraging online business is another important benefit. During the COVID-19 pandemic, and again now during the cost of living crisis, customer services staff have made just under 40,000 outbound calls to Shropshire residents who were in need of some extra support. This is much more proactive. Support for residents who may be finding it more difficult to cope, and making contact like this at the right time and with the right help offers a good prevention. It can stop people from falling into crisis situations, which can absorb far more time and resource from the council and the NHS system locally. The customer service centre has no new resource that can be used to make these contacts, so we have to find a way of using our existing customer service staff. Therefore, we think that what has been proposed through this review is the best compromise between encouraging more people to do business with the council online, remaining open during the most popular times of the day, so that we can still provide an adequate telephone service for those unable to transact online, and also freeing up enough hours for our staff to devote to making much more proactive contact with those who may need some extra help and support. The report itself explains more about the rationale for suggesting these changes, and the appendices show more about the volumes of calls across a working day and working week, together with suggested options for revising opening times, on which we intend to consult with residents. This report therefore seeks a recommendation to consult with Shropshire's residents and stakeholder organisations on these proposals, using a variety of media available online, through calling the customer service centre and through selected community venues. So I'm happy to take any
any questions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Joyce and then Chris, yeah.
Thank you. In your synopsis, it says at the end, change to preventative outbound customer contact. Exactly what does that mean? How do you know who you need to contact?
Yeah, thank you. That's quite a bit more a operational question. So I'll bring in Chris. Westwood to answer that.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Do you want to just move the mic just a bit further along? It's not very good in here.
Okay, thank you. If I start by saying, Chair, that this council has such rich data on its residents, it's not surprising given the variety of services that we provide. We can't use all of that data, but from the systems that we can already have permission to access, we found already tens of thousands of people that may well be in need of this contact. So what we've done is we've looked at activities that they've engaged in with this council that have told us something about that person. So these could be people that are known to adult services but not actively engaged with them. It could be old or even our oldest residents. It will be a case of an illness, a lifetime illness or a disability perhaps, financial, those at risk with their homes, their tenancies, those who have been homeless, they're now trying to make it again. People with low incomes, people with young families. So each time they have engaged with the council, we've picked up something about them, and cross-referencing all of this gets us a good cross-section of people that we then prioritise, all of which will have some additional factor in their life that might be making things a little more difficult for them, and that has certainly been the outcome of the calls that we have been making. There's also a correlation we know between those who are recently bereaved, particularly older residents recently bereaved, and the potential for them to fall into self-neglect. I have seen that personally from within my own family, but to know that we can make that outbound contact, and it needs only be light touch, just to make sure that they are not isolated, that they are supported, that they can engage socially, that they do have the skills and the tools they need to prevent from falling into crisis. Isolation comes into that. We've seen right from the start of COVID, and we're still seeing now the impact of people's support mechanisms falling apart. And for some of them, they've still not got themselves back together adequately. And isolation is having a profound effect on people. This is certainly we've picked up within our current cost of living calls, and our cost of living calls has now hit over 25,000 contacts. The conversation may initially be about the cost of living, but it's much, much wider than that. Customer service staff are good at engaging with people, they're good at listening to people, they're good at getting people to talk, and we are establishing the need, and we're picking up some really good examples of where we've been able to help people at the right time before they do fall into crisis. It can make a real difference. And there's one thing that I would add to that, and that is about helping people to upskill themselves digitally, which may only seem a small part of it, but as I see this unroll more and more, it's convinced me that at a time in people's lives where literally they're surrounded by four walls, being able to access the internet can turn those into four windows. So this is an ideal opportunity to find people who actually want to engage digitally and help them get that digital upskilling program that we're also currently running. And then there is one final project that we now hope to pilot, which is potentially supporting home care, using very bespoke video call equipment to replace some care calls with virtual calls instead. Because by doing so, again, that light touch, that intervention, which is at a distance but still very human, might help to free up carers' time for people who've got more intense needs. So already in there's a very rich field of people that we are contacting and for whom we are finding need.
Yeah, of course you can, yeah.
How are you going to consult with people who are not on IT? How are they going to take part in this consultation?
Oh, can you put your mic on, please, Joyce?
How are you going to consult with people who are not IT literate? How are they going to take part in the consultation if they don't know what's going on? Will you be writing to everybody?
We won't be writing to everybody, but bear in mind that every day people are going to be phoning us, and the first thing they will hear now from the time any consultation goes live is the fact that this is going on, how to do that online if they are online, but otherwise speak to the advisor, and they'll advise you further. So we'll make this available on paper if people need it, through Shropshire Local, through libraries, through all of our voluntary and community sector partners, through SELC, whatever methodology we have, it won't simply be restricted to something that's online.
I have to say, Chair, I do have concerns that a lot of people won't pick up on this that aren't IT literate or don't go in the library, or people who are stuck at home on their own.
Well, I think, yeah, no, and I think part of it is how we advertise the consultation. And also a big part of it is actually that we explain to people the improvements to the service that we're making. So it might be an opportunity for Rob or Chris to go on Radio Shropshire, which is probably the best thing to do, because probably a lot of the people who'll be taking part will listen to Radio Shropshire and explain. And maybe we could ask Chris to do that, because I think once they understand what's going on, I think they will probably be quite happy. And also some of the experience you've got in people you've helped.
Thank you, Chair. I will be more than willing to do that. I've already said that I will go and speak to
Don't know what you think about that, Nigel.
Yes, Chair, certainly that would be something we'd be looking to do. And just to also pick up on one of the points that Councillor Barrow was making, we will be contacting a lot of stakeholder groups. For example, we have strong links through things like our social task force representative groups, ensuring that they put forward views as well as part of that consultation. So proactively going out and seeking those people.
Okay, thank you. Chris wanted to speak, and then Julia.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got reservations about this myself. Not all elderly people want to go digital is the first thing. I know a lot of elderly people. Yeah. They're not capable of doing it. As long as there's a system in place for them to contact the council, I don't think I'd have a problem with it. Looking at the cost means nothing to me on this one, because people need a helpline. And I see in the report a survey by Lloyds Bank found that 3 times more 70-year-olds registered for online banking. I go in the bank quite regularly, and I went in the other day in a building society, and you can get a better interest rate if you go home and go online than you can in the branch itself talking to somebody. So you are being forced to go online against your own will. And it's a generation thing, because before long, everything will be digital. But we've got to look after these pensioners and these elderly people who do not wish to go digital. So I've no problem if there's a system in place, the 10 till 4 may suffice, but that's my opinion.
Could I come back, Chair?
Yep, because you can.
Just to say, I do take on your points there, Chris, but we're not switching off the phone lines. We are still open. We're just altering the hours at which we are open. There are other categories of people as well. And I'll tell you very, very briefly a very small story about my own father, actually, my own dad, who actually came to me and said years and years ago, and said, Rob, you're never ever going to get me on one of those iPad things. And 6 months later, he came back to me and he said, Rob, I can't quite repeat exactly what he said, but he said, Rob, I can't even play golf anymore because I need to go on the golf club and book a tee off time. So you better get me one of these iPad things. And I went away, got one of these iPads. And not only does he book his tee off times now, but he gets all his racing results. He does all his online banking. He does his emailing, and he would never go back to where he was before. So there is sometimes a slight thing around giving people a slight nudge, I guess, in the right direction, because they don't really know what I mean, a lot of this can be around fear.
Okay, thank you. So I've got Julia, Gwilym, and then Roger.
Thank you. I share the concerns, and I'm really grateful that you've both raised them. I think some issue with elderly people isn't necessarily fear or lack of training. In some cases, they perhaps can't afford to buy the equipment, get Wi-Fi installed in their homes. At the moment, they're probably choosing between heating and eating. So the idea that they should learn a new skill, buy a new piece of equipment and have their home turned upside down for full fibre is not at the top of their priority list. And while you're describing benefits for some people, I think that we must retain the safety net for the most vulnerable. So when you're looking at the times when you're going to retain it open, I would ask you to keep them for the longest possible time. And if we are thinking about older people, I will put my prejudice on the table and suggest you have the phone lines open earlier, because I think the earlier calls might be from the older people. If the data is so rich and excellent, please could we then keep a list of the abandoned calls? Can we be monitoring if the same number keeps calling and abandoning out of hours? In other words, somebody's trying to get through to the council when the lines are not open, and they keep trying because they are unable to use alternative methods, because that could be a flag that somebody's in distress and that they could be supported. My other question is for you, actually, Rob, as the portfolio holder. I'd like us all to have a look at section 5.1, which is the financial implications. I'm struggling to understand the English of this paragraph, and I wonder if you can help me understand what it actually means, because it says the financial advantage of the solutions are explained. The expectation is that the cost of transferring the resulting staff time into making outbound contacts will be met from grants and further funding sources. Therefore, we do not expect any redundancies. Depending on the level of opening hours, we anticipate a reduction in budgets of approximately £93,000. If I've understood it, and I probably haven't, because it's quite a complicated way to phrase this, if I've understood it, there will be redundancies of the call centre staff that will save this authority £93,000 from its base budget. Separately, the council may apply for an external grant, and if successful, you may use that external grant to employ people, potentially the same ones redeployed, to do a project in which they make outbound calls. My question is, are you reducing the base budget by £93,000 of the staff in the call centre?
Okay, what I'd start by saying is, first of all, we're not making any redundancies, and I want to make that absolutely clear. What tends to happen is we get a natural turnover of staff. So what might happen is when a member of staff leaves, we just may not replace them. But if I could just bring officers in just to clarify that.
Yes, do you want to clarify?
If I can take that question. No, it's a point well made, Councillor, and thank you for making it. The expectation is that this is simply a transfer of cost from one source to another. The overall effect does look as though the net budget for customer services has been reduced, and in some ways that is a good thing, but the same amount of time will be paid for via another source. So I'm not losing anything. I'm not expecting to make staff redundant. I'm simply shifting this into the preventative field, and that will be where this comes from.
So I think there's an issue with the wording, isn't there? Because the wording states that alternative use of staff time will be met from grants and other funding sources, which is not base budget. And if you delete a post or don't replace it, you have made the post redundant, irrespective of the human. So whether you're reducing hours or posts or losing humans, you are reducing the staff capacity on the base budget by 93k. Putting that cost onto some external other body is not for this council. Is the council losing £93,000 of staff capacity from its base budget?
It's simply being financed another way, so no. I'm not losing any money to pay for these staff. Their contracts remain unchanged. It's a shift in financial sourcing.
Can I just get James to come in and sort this out? Thank you, James.
So the part of this that you probably are missing is in relation to savings that were already identified in Customer Services Centre. So those were already identified in a previous year. What's happening here is those savings are being delivered. There is a transfer of staff into another component. If that component were funded from within the Customer Service Centre, you wouldn't deliver the saving that's already been delivered. So therefore, other grant from other parts, and let's face it, local authorities are funded by lots and lots of grants, and some of those specific grants are continual. So all we're saying is that there are other parts, other funding and other grants from other parts of the organisation for a different purposing of these staff resource that will cover this. So this is not a case of we've got to apply for a grant. This is not a case that this is not in base budget funding, because all base budget funding effectively comes from house tax or grant.
How can this be recorded as a saving if the council is still paying their salary? Either a saving or it's a cut.
But no, I think James has explained it quite well. But anyway, have one more go, James.
What you've got is budgets across the council in all different service areas, and what we're saying is within the customer services centre, that budget has been reduced, and that saving has been delivered by a number of different ways. This element is staff are transferring across. So that budget saving over here has now been delivered, and then over here, a grant has been repurposed, funding has been repurposed to enable these individuals to undertake a role which has been repurposed.
So the department's budget will be greater than this one will be transferred from one department to another department.
No, what I'm saying is that the saving is being delivered here, and there has been a repurposing of funding elsewhere.
What was the funding previously used for?
For other purposes. I mean, I'm not the budget holder. I don't know what's been agreed with other service areas is that there will be, in terms of the proactive nature of this work that's being undertaken, it was seen as, well, this is a better way of achieving the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So I will repurpose this grant to enable this to happen. What I need is some people. At the same time, we've got the customer service centre that's saying, well, we're looking to close our hours, reduce the hours down, and make a saving that's already been agreed. So we've just put those two things together. So
it's incredibly opaque and confusing. We're repeatedly told that the organisation will be transformed and smaller. At the same time, we're told that there are no redundancies. Here we're told that there's
saving and that their tasks will move elsewhere and be funded by external grant, but that nobody is losing their job. The two halves of the equation don't really add up. If what you're saying is true, the staff involved will not have any change to their terms and conditions, will they?
I think. Pardon? Yes, and yeah. Okay, so we seem to have spent a lot of time talking about terms and conditions and pay at performance. But anyway, Gwilym, you want to say something?
Yeah, it was a slightly different tack. I listened to the points about the elderly. And it'd be very interesting if the elderly were listening in to us, because if I went to my elderly, who are, I would probably say the majority of them are online. They're on digital. During COVID, they had their talking to their staff, not their staff, their family, their friends, their granddaughters, especially with family all over the world now. It's a completely different world. I've got neighbours who are well in their late 80s and they do their shopping online. I do get Julia's point about those people who can't afford to, and I believe that there is a position there for the household supporting grant, maybe working with the hardship and poverty groups to actually look at how we mentor and support those people. And it may actually be cheaper for us as an organisation to provide them where it's needed to be provided, not blanket coverage, or encourage them to go to the library to be mentored, etc., etc. But I honestly think you get a huge kickback from a lot of the elderly population if you go around saying they're not digital, because there's an awful lot of them that are.
Yeah. Yes, you certainly can.
Well, you may live in a different world to where I live, Gwilym, but there's a lot of elderly people out there. You go to any senior citizens club and whatever, they do wish to learn, and the point about the affordability and everything. And I just think that it's a changing world, and I think some people are scared of this changing world, especially the elderly. And like I say, if there's measures in there that suffice, I'm happy with that. But there's certainly a lot of elderly people out there that are scared of digital banking and whatever.
Yeah. Okay, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I share a lot of the concerns that have been raised and the finance justification for it. I think I might understand it, but I do think it needs to be rephrased. But Shropshire Council is a public service. Should be available for the public to ask questions, raise queries, to get answers when they want them, when they need them. And I would not be in favour of reducing it. Cost savings, I think that's been there, but feedback. One of the answers or one of the queries I get all the time is that I sent this message and I get no feedback. At least when you're talking to a person, you can express to that person that you've made the query 2-3 times and you haven't got the feedback. And sorry, this council has a reputation of not feeding back the information that they have been asked to provide. If one contacts Age UK, they will tell you that when last time I talked to them, might be 2 years ago, there's 25 to 30% of the over 60s have no internet. So I don't know where you live, and there's quite a few around where I do. They refuse online banking. They want nothing to do with it. They don't trust it. It's maybe an age, whatever, but they are not happy with it. They prefer the telephone. I've got 2 sons. One of the sons has no landline now. He only uses mobile. But you talk to the over 60s, and it's the land they want. And that is the answer that the government and BT have had about their proposal to do away with the copper. People want their landlines. It'd be interesting to see the 5-year stats on this and the numbers of actually, are they reducing? Are the numbers there or not? But I do have concerns with this. I think it's too early to do this. We might do it in 5 or 8 years, 10 years time, when people get more confident, use more, but numbers of residents do need to be able to telephone the council as part of the public service that we should be providing. So no, I think this is a step too early, too far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this is actually a green paper, so I thank Rob very much for bringing the green paper to us, because at least we've had a look at it before it's gone out, and I think that's a very positive move forward for our committee. What I propose we do with this green paper is actually just to note it, and I think there's a very important role for local members here in disseminating this information and asking people to actually respond to the consultation. Roger.
If I can, Chairman, I'd ask the the cabinet member to actually take it back to officers to look at the issues that have been raised here and take them on board before he takes it forward, maybe to cabinet, because one of the issues that's been raised recently is that another scrutiny committee raised problems about green bins, and it went forward to the cabinet without anything being there. And I think the leader said, we will have to re-look at it again. So no, it was the road closures, the road closures one. And the leader said it needs to be. So I'd ask Rob, through you, Chairman, to actually take it back, look at it, and just wonder whether to take it forward or not.
Well, all I'd say is, look, this is a process thing. So obviously we're bringing it here now to scrutiny. It's going to go out to consultation. Once we've received the results, also of the consultation, there will obviously at that point be a form of a review, and at that point, then we can change things if we need to change things.
Yeah, and I think that's fair enough, really. That if we do as I suggested and note the report, because whilst I appreciate people have concerns, I think those concerns need to be articulated by the general public, because I think it's up to the general public to actually have their say, and hopefully if we go on the radio, we'll get some meaningful feedback on this, because it's all very well 2 or 3 people saying what they think, but actually if we go on the radio and as members we help people fill in these consultation forms, we will get something of value to feed back to you, and hopefully you will take note of what's fed back to you. Joyce. Oh yeah, can you keep your mic on, please, Joyce, because people can't hear
If I
you
can
on
take
there.
advantage of the portfolio holder, slightly going off piece.
Yep.
Some officers' emails are still going out with the coronavirus thing at the bottom, and it needs taking off.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I will feed that back in.
So is everyone happy? So we're only noting the report. Is everyone happy we just noted? Okay? Right, thank you very much. So what I suggest is, because it is 5 to 12, we actually have 5 minutes just to get a coffee and go to the toilet, a toilet break. So we have been going 2 hours. Is that all right with everyone? Right. Yeah. Yep. Okay, welcome back. We have to vacate the room by 1:30 at the latest because Cabinet's in here, so if we can bear that in mind.
It's in a different room, but we will need to transfer the IT.
We'll need to transfer the IT. Okay, item 8 is financial resilience. So, do you want to go first, Gwynam, or James? Which one of you wants to go first? Yeah, okay, you're on, Gwynam.
I can see we've got Ben online, hopefully. Obviously, with the budget and the major savings programme we're bringing forward, we've had a lot of questions and information asked regarding the journey we've been on to date, the journey we're going on, and also how we compare within the market with other local authorities. Ben and James put together a very informative briefing, which I think we had a couple of weeks ago, which I found was really useful to actually put a measure of where Shropshire Council stands in the countrywide picture. That's all I really need to say as a way of introduction, Chair. And obviously, if you need to say any more, I think you were at the meeting, weren't you, Chair?
Can I just say it was a really good meeting. Hope everyone who's here had the opportunity to listen to it if they didn't attend. So thank you, Benjay. That was very good. Has anybody got any particular questions, or hopefully people did listen to it, or no? Well, this report is just to receive a verbal update. So if there's no more questions, we will move on.
So is there a verbal update?
Pardon?
Is there a verbal update?
Well, Gwynam's just given it. Yep, go on then, James.
Really, the point around it was there was no point taking the presentation to Performance Management Scrutiny Committee today, the day before Council, so we brought it forward. Yeah. What we wanted to do was make sure it's formally minuted that opportunity had been had and an opportunity for any questions to be raised. So the verbal update was just to say that's the position that as William pointed out. There is no further information that's been provided, but it's there ready for there's the opportunity to ask any questions.
Yeah, did you actually listen to it, Julia? Yeah. Yeah, so you had opportunity to listen to it. So, yeah, it's on the members portal as well. So if everyone is happy with the verbal update, we will move on to item number 9, which is the performance monitoring report. So I'll hand over to James.
So this is the performance monitoring report for the third quarter. I'm not intending to go through this in any detail, but the information is available there. It's been to Cabinet and it's been considered there, and we've got the quarterly monitor for finance as well coming later in the agenda. So it's just the opportunity for Scrutiny Committee to ask any questions as they wish. Helen Watkinson is here, who will be able to answer any detailed or significant questions that need to be asked.
Can I just say, Helen's put a few more charts up on the performance data on the members portal, which is really helpful. So hopefully you'll continue to add to those, because I think it's a good place for people to look. So thank you for that. Sorry, Roger, I didn't see. Yeah, carry on.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's there. I anticipated a long meeting today, so I've only got one question today, Chairman, and that's the place plan. If one looks at the chart, it's 100% right the way through, including December 22. And if one looks at the table to do with it, it's saying stage 2 examination process January 23 in progress. Well, stage 1 was not completed. As I understand it, there was the planning inspectors visited Shropshire in January. They've now sent a report back, which says the report is legal, but they've raised a number of questions, which means that our long-term planners now have to go back and investigate and come forward with a the revised housing supply. So, and if one goes back into it, it was originally stated that the public examination and to be adopted was going to be in 2022. We're now in 2023. We haven't even got a date yet for a public examination, let alone when it's going to be. And some people are now predicting it'll be 2025, 2024 when we have it. Government say you should cater for a 15-year housing supply, and it goes to 2038. We're now in 2023. 2038 is 15 years. So if it isn't adopted this year, I think we might have to go back and make it a 2039 or 2040 to maintain that 15-year. But to come back to the original question, it's 100% all the way through. So the target is revised and revised and revised. So it shows it good. We got 100%. No, we haven't. It should have been there in 2022. It is being delayed for whatever reasons, but if it's a performance one, surely it should show that has happened. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Roger. I think actually Roger makes a very good point there, but I think it's up to the planning policy people to decide about whether they extend it till 2040, which is probably what will happen. Julie, you want to ask a question?
It's a similar comment, really, and it's relating to how the performance is reported specifically to this meeting for us to scrutinise. So if you remember at the last meeting, I asked why missing from the report was the homelessness strategy, which was rated red on the portal, and we had really good explanations of the reasons and mitigation for its delay, but nobody could explain why it hadn't been included in the report. And actually, officers apologised and said perhaps it should have been in there. It's still not in today. It's still red. It's still failing. There are other things in there which are red, such as the financial outturn report. So what we're finding is if we go on the portal, there are KPIs that are red and failing, but they're not being selected to be included in the report that's presented to us. So we're looking at something where 5 are showing improvement, 7 are fine, 2 are declining, so the majority are doing well. So we're hearing from Roger that some dates are moved so they don't look as though they're failing. We're also hearing that some that are failing are just not included in the report. I don't think that it should be allowed that there is a selection to cherry pick the ones which are doing okay. Otherwise, the perception from the public and the press might be that we're just covering up our failures. I think that we need to be much more systematic. You know, performance management is about having an objective system. So the usual process is that you have exception reporting. In other words, those which are below standard delivery, the exceptions, the outliers, should be the ones that are included in the report. And I'd like to make a proposal today to this committee that we, as a proposal, going forwards, use exception reporting. In other words, any KPIs which are red or amber be included in the report that comes to this committee. I hope that I can have a seconder from someone.
Happy to second that, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just let Gwynam speak.
I do understand the ethos of what you're actually saying, but my view would be that this is the report that went to Cabinet, which you're obviously having a bigger debate about. And I notice in two items' time, you've got your work programme. So wouldn't it not be more valid to actually look at the performance reports, and where you highlight things as you have highlighted, you then put them on your work programme so we get the expertise here to actually tell you what's going on?
I'm afraid it's a misunderstanding, William. They're not in the performance report. That's my point. My point is KPIs on the portal that are failing have not been included in this report, and they should be. Okay. And that's what I'm requesting going forward, so we can do exactly as you suggest. Thank you.
Yeah. So yes, so we can do that.
It's not my remit, so I wouldn't know. So.
But we're actually looking at the report that from Cabinet. Yeah. So. Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah. I mean, that would create, the only thing is that would create a lot of work. And for instance, the example Julia uses about the housing or homelessness, that presumably would that go to Rob Macy's scrutiny, would it, Joyce? Yes.
Sorry, perhaps I haven't explained myself quite clearly. The report we're looking at just picks out some KPIs and brings them here. There's just 5 lines on each one. I'm reporting to you that 2 have been missed off that are failings, and they have not been included in this report. That's not a huge amount of work. We can ask Tom Dobbs himself how much work it would be to press a button that extracts those that are exception reporting, those that are failing. I'm just stating that the method by which these KPIs have been selected, for some reason, has missed off those that are failing, and they need to be included. It's not a big task. It's just that the selection isn't adequate, and we don't want to be held up to people suggesting any perception that you're covering up failings. So let's be completely systematic and objective, remove politics from it, and say that these reports will report by exception. So anything that is failing must be included.
James.
So I understand the point completely. I think the kind of the bigger point around this is that just looking on the performance portal, it's very clear that the target has been missed since December 2019. And therefore, in terms of exception reporting, it would mean that gets reported every single quarter. Now, whether it's reported or not doesn't change the fact that that is the information that's available to all members. And the point that's being raised, and I think the point that Grudden was making, was this can be considered by whichever scrutiny committee that you wish, in whichever way you wish to. It doesn't have to appear in a report to do that. And far more information. Chris Westwood talked about it earlier. Helen is doing a massive amount of work around this to get more and more of the rich data that we hold as an organisation into places on the website, so that they can be viewed and reviewed and scrutinised. And what we need to move away from is only if it appears in a report that goes to a particular committee that we can consider it. So it needs to be much more about, there is the data, it's available for members to look at and consider, and absolutely we'll move to exception reporting. That's the approach. I just think there's a nuance within this, which I don't think is necessary for debate here, but to continue to report on poor performance when that performance is already known isn't necessarily an exception in that sense.
No, okay, I hear what you're saying. Chris?
Chair, I think we have to be very careful when I hear the word cover-up in here. I will be on no committee where there's any cover-up. So I would retract that first, is my first thing. Because it's not any cover-up. It's just been explained by a senior officer, and yet you've used the term cover-up. And this is live on the thing, and I would ask you to retract it.
Please, Julia.
Chair, I would ask Councillor Julie Buckley to retract the word.
I was very clear, we do not want any perception of cover-up because we have chosen not to report failings. I was very clear because I don't want that perception.
So I take issue with you about covering up failing because all the red services are clearly marked on the performance report. So we're not trying to cover it up.
They are there. Report, Chair. They are not in this report. That is, I am stating the thing that you claim is happening. It's missing. There are 2 red failed KPIs not included in this report. And the purpose of this report is to bring to this committee, the purpose of this committee is to scrutinise performance. So where performance is failing, it must be included in the report.
So the 2 that are missing, you're saying, is the homelessness strategy
and the financial outturn. Now, if something is failing since 2019, it is still the task of this committee, whose task is to monitor and scrutinise performance. If something is failing for 3-4 years, it is very much our task to repeatedly scrutinise 4 years of failing. That is exactly why we are here. And I repeat my proposal that we move, as James himself endorses, we move to exception reporting. Let's be open and transparent and include it in there. If there's an explanation and a mitigation, as there was for the homelessness strategy, then everyone's aware of it and we're being completely transparent.
So all this is about really is about putting 2 extra things in the performance report.
No, it's about adopting a mechanism for all exception reporting. It's not just these 2. Next month, it might be a different one. It's whichever measures are red
should be included in the report to Cabinet and this committee. This month it happens to be those two. Next month it might be 22. If there's an automatic exception reporting, we can be assured that we will collectively scrutinise wherever the failings are.
So, James, do you want to just...
So the only thing I'll say, Chair, is just very simply, we've spent 5 minutes debating this. We haven't done any scrutiny on the issue at hand. The point is, we all know that is not being delivered. The fact that it wasn't in the report literally would have been a line that said it failed again. The question is, what do you as a scrutiny committee want to do about it? That's the bit that I think that's the important part. But we can change the reporting, and what I don't want to do is create a report that every single time, because we are going to have much more data in the system. If every single exception report is reported in a report that then members print off, and it just becomes it won't be scrutiny.
So we need to focus on our work programme. I got that. So, Joyce.
Surely the home to scrutinise those things are in the different scrutiny committees that they belong to.
So what we're saying is actually that we should build those into our work programmes. Roger.
I think on the performance, it may still be read, but is it as read as what it was? Is it still? I use the word failing because that's what it is. But is it still, or is that failure getting less of a failure, if I can explain it? And that would be useful to show that something is happening. So that's where I'm coming from. So if it's failing because it's 50% below target, and the next time it's 40% below target, okay. We can note that and go on. But if it's gone from 50 to 55%, then I think it does need to look at that performance. So that's where I'm coming from on this. Is there any difference at all? But also, as a final one is, I repeat it what I've said many times, is it would be good if the performance report came to this committee first, and then it can be incorporated in the performance report or a scrutiny report back at Cabinet. Because we may pick out certain items there and the Cabinet can do it. So it's taking it that way round, providing the dates work, because we do need, and this is Q3, okay, we are where we are with it, but trying to work it that way, which would add benefit, I think, maybe to the Cabinet.
So, James.
If I may, Chair, again, think about the Performance Management Scrutiny Committee work programme and the work programmes of the other scrutiny committees. This information is available on the portal. We don't have to wait. You don't have to wait until Cabinet receive a report to scrutinise that. Anything can be taken forward. It's down to the chairs to actually decide what needs to be picked up. In relation to this particular example, I mean, the performance of the homelessness strategy is shown at 50%. What it means is we still don't have an updated homelessness strategy since 2019. It's a black and white pass or fail. What we were given was assurances that this was being worked on. We were given assurances because the individuals that are trying to undertake this are the same individuals, a small team, who are dealing with things like the housing, bed and breakfast, homelessness around Ukrainian families, all of that element. All of these elements are being dealt with. And so in terms of prioritisation, the team have said this is more important than updating the strategy, because we basically have got a strategy that we're working to, but we haven't done is written it, which is why it's not a complete fail zero, it's a 50%, because we're working to a strategy, it's just the paper strategy is out of date. So the important point within this is, A, that this is not a failure in terms of the work that's being done is inappropriate around that particular indicator. But I do agree more assurance needs to be provided on that. And I think as a scrutiny committee or one of the relevant scrutiny committees, you may say, I want to look at this in more detail. I want to know why this is not happening. In terms of the reporting, I can only reiterate, more and more information will be available on the website for members of the public to scrutinise and consider. And any of those issues can be brought forward. You do not have to wait as a committee for a report that's going for information and consideration by Cabinet, the only basis on which you consider the performance of the organisation.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, James. Right, so is everyone happy we note the report?
Vote on my proposal, Chair.
Pardon?
Are you not going to vote on my proposal?
No, I'm going to discuss it when we discuss the work programme at the end. Unless you want to vote on it.
Well, it relates to this item. It doesn't really relate to the work programme.
Okay.
If we can't agree to have a system for KPIs into this, then they may become separate individual items on the work programme. But it would be much simpler, and we're hearing from officers that we want to move to exception reporting. We don't want to be having some kind of subjective selection of which KPIs come here. It needs to be a formal system, a systemised approach. My proposal is that future reports include exception reporting.
Okay, and is that seconded? Yeah. Okay. Alan.
I just wonder what the purpose of this committee is actually then. If the idea that we shouldn't be hearing about poorly performing areas and those that are not necessarily failing, but those that are up against it in terms of performance, I thought that was our role across the piece. In addition to whatever specific work is being done in the other individual scrutiny panels. We had that overarching responsibility as an overview of performance and reconciling difficulties across the council as a whole.
Right. So,
which can only be done with the approval and the inclusion of all those areas that are not performing satisfactorily.
Okay, so Gwilym.
I'm just getting a bit frustrated that a big fuss has been made about that we haven't actually delivered the strategy document around the homelessness.
Yeah.
Where in fact, every single member in this committee is fully aware of the work that Laura Fisher and her team are doing with everybody who is involved in the homelessness strategy. And I find it quite sort of nitpicking. It's typical socialism, Chair. You know, it's process driven. Because we haven't got the strategy which tells us what we should be doing, it's a KPI and it's red and we should shout about it. Well, actually, rather than concentrating on the bureaucracy of getting that strategy done, we are actually out there delivering the outcomes to people who needed it and couldn't wait for the strategy to be produced. And I'm glad that those officers spent the time sorting out stuff for the people who needed it, rather than worrying about the KPI to get a report to this committee.
Yeah, and my feeling on all this is that part of it's right. You know, these red KPIs should be in there, but I would not like to go to a system whereby we only look at minority reports, because I think that the minority report should be split up to the relevant scrutiny committees, which is their job to look at them all. So in other words, we are looking at the performance, and that's what we've done today, and this is what we're examining now. The performance report's not our fault that these two KPIs aren't in there, so we can ask for them to be included in future. But how we divvy up the work is then down to the individual scrutiny committees. So that's it. So you've made your okay. So who's in favour of Julia's proposal? Or who's against? 5.
3, 4, right hand up 5.
5, yeah. So what I would propose is that we do include the KPIs in the report, which, as James said, is a fairly simple thing to do, and that any of the red items should be considered by the relevant scrutiny committee, and the work should be done via the relevant scrutiny committee. Is everyone happy? Can we vote on that? I got seconder? Joyce is second. All those in favour?
Well, could I just ask before we vote on this then, if that's the case, that the difficult areas go to the individual scrutiny panels.
Yeah.
We don't have any discrete responsibilities other than finance. So are we only going to be a performance management scrutiny committee of financial affairs?
The financial report was also missing. That was one of the KPIs who were also not given that.
So as far as no, I mean we do the scrutiny of the finances. We also did today, as you know, the scrutiny of the children's performance. So we can absolutely scrutinise the performance of the service. So if we're talking about homelessness, okay, so we would look at the performance of homelessness and say we have too many homeless people. But if you want a report on why we've got too many homeless people, then that should surely go to Rob Macy, who does all the housing, who can either do it at his committee or set up a task and finish group, and they can actually come up with some proposals on how they think they're going to reduce the numbers of rough sleepers and things. That's my take on it. Roger.
This committee is, and it might change after May, but it is the Performance Scrutiny Committee. And as part of its committee structure, the chairman of the other overview scrutiny committees sit around the table with us. So they're all here so that they can hear what is said by this one, and then where it's applicable, they can take it back to their own committee.
Yeah.
So it comes through here. So performance scrutiny comes here, and the appropriate chairman who sits around it can then take it back if it is felt it is applicable and needed to be looked at.
Yeah.
So I thought that was the process.
It is.
Regarding whatever said about process and the rest of it, I'm not going into the politics of it, but that's why this committee is called it, so that we can look at the overall performance of Shropshire Council doing all its aspects, and anything that's referred back is picked up by the appropriate chairman who sits around the table with us.
Which is exactly what I said, Roger, but we can include those KPIs. We can ask Cabinet to include the red KPIs in their report.
Claire, because it sounds very similar to mine. Your proposal is that Cabinet should include the red KPIs. I'll second that proposal if that's what you're suggesting.
Yes, but on top of that, what I'm saying is that we will ask for those two red KPIs
Not
to be
these
included.
two, but all the red in the future
Yes.
red KPIs.
But what you were saying was, and what worried me about your proposal was, you were talking about minority reporting.
I didn't use that word at all. I just want them included in this headline report.
So the impression I got was you wanted us to sit here and trail through
Not at all. I want the headline report that gives us 2 lines on each KPI to tell us which KPIs are red. The finance outturn report is red. You're saying that's the only thing we actually scrutinise. That wasn't included either. Quite right, the detail goes to the specific committee. But so far, somebody's choosing the ones that are succeeding and they are omitting some that are failing. And we don't want any perception that we are choosing not to highlight failure. So to be transparent, in future, we just include all red KPIs in this headline report. And I believe that's the wording of your own proposal. If I've understood it, I will happily second it.
Yes, so that's basically it, that they should come in the report. And what we do with them after that is down to the individual chairs of scrutiny. So let's hope. So if you
happy to second that, Claire. Happy to second.
All right. So have we got a unanimous decision here? Yeah. Right. Okay. Thank you. Right. Okay. So item number 10 is the Q3 financial monitoring report. James, would you like to?
Yes, this is the Q3 financial monitor, which demonstrates a £9.95 million projected overspend by the end of the year, slight improvement on Q2. The impact of that on general fund balance is shown within the report, and a breakdown of the areas where that overspend comes from is also shown in detail within the report. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, have we got any questions for James? Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. Because I'm a member of this, I raise the same question that I raised at the Cabinet, and that is it's to do with the reporting on this of Place Directorate, where it says that the corporate landlord property and development section is £4 million in the red. And if one looks down at climate change Shire Services, again, it's showing a big overspend and it's in the red. There are other ones there as well, but I picked out those before, and we've got the budget debate tomorrow anyway, but I'm just picking out those two about it, which is helping make the £10 million predicted overspend for this current financial year. I recognise about the pressures on the adult and children's services, so I haven't gone into that because I think everybody understands that, and that's largely outside our remit, and we had a discussion this morning about it. So it's that place directorate, which is also in the red by a large amount, variance of over £5 million, which, if it was correct, would enable this council to be in a much better position than it is now. And want assurance as well that maybe next year the figures that are in the place directorate are expected to be made, I would suppose, because we are a scrutiny committee, and we're almost coming to the end of this financial year, and this council is in difficulties. I think everybody would agree with that.
Yeah, James.
Okay, so Councillor Evans is absolutely correct. The overspend, almost 50% of the overspend comes from within the place directorate when looked at on a net basis, and the majority of that overspend relates to the commercial services element, which is around the corporate landlord property and development. I think to give some reassurance in terms of going forward, this has been viewed ahead of the 23-24 financial year. So these savings targets are not in there for the 23-24 in the same way. So that's an important point in terms of managing that. Why are they in for 22-23? If you can recall, going back 12 months, we reviewed and considered the commercial opportunities that were available, and to deliver these commercial savings, a capital budget was put aside. That capital budget would be for investment, and that investment would then proposed to then deliver a series of commercial developments, savings, income generation, etc. So going back 12 months, before the invasion of Ukraine, before the cost of living crisis, before the inflationary impacts, and all of those things had an impact on the market. So at the point at which this budget was put together, it was felt that there was an opportunity to funding to deliver this return. What we've seen over the last 12 months is that capital investment has not been made because the market opportunities have not been available. So in not undertaking that capital investment, the net benefit then of those commercial developments to repay that funding and deliver income over and above it were not realised. So that's why that is sitting there in the current year, and alternative arrangements have been made to try and offset the impact of that, and going forward in 23-24 that particular saving has been removed.
Okay, thank you, James. Have we got? Yep, Roger.
Yeah. So what we're saying, or what I'm understanding, is that we were predicting a £1 million income from the corporate landlord property developments, and actually, in fact, it was where it is shown there in Shire Services, etc. So those reductions do not appear in next year's budget to be considered tomorrow, but we're doing the budget reductions with little income from commercial developments. Is that what I'm hearing? Commercial developments contribution to the council's expenses is much reduced.
Yeah. What we've identified is that commercial opportunities that we think will be available, it would be unwise to assume that those opportunities will be available in 23-24 given the situation. So there is a plan over the next 4 years, I think it is, which will deliver figures around that. but that's spread over a 4-year period. So what we're doing is we're taking that initial cliff edge for 23-24 out of the budget and spreading it over a longer period of time. And the financial strategy then takes into account that reprofiling of that, which is why the alternative budget and financial strategy have been put in place, taking account of that.
Okay. I just want to ask a little question for Julia. So, I think Cornovi were meant to put so much into the pot. Is the money from their development started to trickle in, James, or?
Yes, Chair. In terms of the Cornovi CDL investments, so we've just signed off the next loan profile. Yeah. So the business case is set out to deliver a number of developments over the next few years, with a peak level of investment in about, I think it's about 2 to 3 years' time. The way that the loans are constructed, there is a return to the council in terms of all that funding that's being lent. So there's an interest return which flows back to the authority on a regular basis. But then there are also capital receipts and dividends and other payments that will come through. So a profile of those have been agreed with CDL, and those have been built in over that appropriate period into the future.
Okay. Ben's got his hand up behind us. Ben, do you want to say something?
Thank you, Chair. I'm echoing. Page 6 of the report references the CDL overage receipts as evidence of what James was saying.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Right, Julia, you wanted to ask. Sorry, Roger, did you want to ask something about what I was asking? And then
if I can, so that I can get my thinking totally correct, Chairman, is that in page 6 of the Cabinet report, I didn't got the report here, but there it's got Shrewsbury Shopping Centres commercial. If I'm looking at that correctly, there was a £44,000 contribution towards the councils. So that investment in that is producing that. Whereas if the money had been in the bank at 3% interest, it would have been a hell of a lot more than that. But I understand it's viewed as an investment, a future investment. But so I can just make sure that I understand it, that commercial shopping centres income 44,000. Or is that a cost?
If I can correct carry on. What the figures are showing are there was again at the point at which this was set in February 2022, an assumed income profit surplus of just under 235,000 was set within the budget. What the shopping centres have actually delivered is £190,000 of income. So they've delivered income over and above the base. But because the projection was it would deliver 235, that's £45,000 under the projection. So it's delivered £190,000 worth of income, but that's not as much as we hoped. Is the simple solution.
Okay, you're right, Roger. Yeah. Okay, Julia.
Thank you. I'm worrying a lot about the capital programme. The two things I'm worrying about, the point really that Roger Evans is making, which is that by the delays to disposal of assets and income being held in those assets rather than in savings is costing us one set of money loss of interest. But you talk in your report as well about the increasing cost of borrowing. So while ever we're unable to release the asset, we're going to have to borrow, and the cost of borrowing is going up, just as we could have had a higher rate of interest if we could have saved it. The reason that I'm worrying is because of what the construction industry is telling us. So they're saying that inflation on construction for commercial projects is around 40%. It's causing not just delays to projects, it's leading a lot of contractors to pulling out, some contractors going under. So that demand around property development, commercial development is quite insecure. And so what I'm worrying about is that this might not just be a delay, but actually there might be some sectoral weakening. And this particular administration's business model is all around, selling assets, investing in commercial developments, using that income to sustain the budget and to reach a balanced budget. And I'm worried that that's predicated on a system which didn't serve as well with the shopping centres, but now actually might also be quite weak in this construction sector context. And I wonder if you can give us any information on that.
Well, I think there's more recent information where things are actually stabilising and coming back more into line. I think that was probably the headlines about 3 or 4 months ago, but I think the situation's slightly different now. I don't know if you want to comment, James.
I can just give an overview. I mean, in reality, we'd need the officers from within the Place Directorate to give an update in relation to that. What I can comment on is in relation to the capital programme, which is a very complex sequence of kind of moving parts. I mean, just to give assurance, we haven't borrowed money for, I think it's about over 10 years now. We haven't actually had to borrow money for the local authority. What we have is a capital receipts programme. That capital receipts programme, which is about selling assets, is dependent upon the market. So you will find that in some instances it's the right time to sell and you can get a decent capital receipt. At other times it's better to hold on to those assets and wait for the market to change. In all of that, we're managing that against then the delivery. And where there are delays in delivery, there is less of a requirement to deliver those capital receipts, particularly if the market is they're not in the right place to deliver those. So what we have at the moment is a position whereby if we were having to renegotiate contracts based on inflation as of today or over the last few months, then clearly that would have an impact. And that would have an impact on the expenditure side. At the same time, if we were having to sell because we needed to generate capital receipts, that may have an impact because you may need to sell at a lower value to get the cash into the bank. In the majority of cases, neither of those are issues as of now. We are able to be, we've got a positive balance in relation to our capital receipts going into the end of the financial year. There's no need to borrow. And we're looking at construction contracts to see what the implications of those are. It may well be that some things may be come online later in the year, and that delay is actually being managed because what we're hearing in terms of construction inflation is that potentially that's peaked and it will be reducing over the remainder of the year. So it would make sense to then reconsider those issues later in the year when we're in a more buoyant situation. But there's that's only an oversight. There'll be examples all across that, but I'm not at this point concerned in relation to any kind of pinch point or back against the wall needing to make any decisions in the short term.
Okay, thank you. So Roger and then David.
A fairly quick one if I can, Chairman, and it's on that page that I talked about before, page 6 of this Cabinet report, Housing Development and HRA, and it's about Cornova's development, returned to the council far more than was expected, which congratulate to them, but the effect on the houses I'm not sure. So can I suggest that maybe the appropriate scrutiny overview committee have a look at Cornova to see what is happening there? Over £500,000 was delivered back to the council from the investment there. We're building houses, hopefully affordable housing. So it's helping the council, but looking at the residents, how is it doing there? So I would suggest, or maybe, suggest that maybe we ask the appropriate scrutiny committee to actually look at that and fit it into their future work programme.
Yeah, and I don't see why we can't have performance data on that, because actually Cornova are doing a really good job. So Helen, if you can add that to your list, thank you very much. Right, David, you wanted to say something?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just on page 76, the thing about environment and transport and street cleansing. My impression is that there's been some cutbacks to street cleansing, particularly in Shrewsbury recently. And I've also heard that the people doing street cleansing in Shrewsbury have been farmed out to other areas as well. And so I'm wondering whether in actual fact there is a real cut going on in street cleansing, and this is to do with the Kier contract. And although there might not be suggestions here, but in actual fact we are seeing real cuts in street cleansing. So I'm worried about that, and I'm worried that the information we have here is not showing the true picture of what's happening on the ground.
I think that's probably a question you need to ask Richard Marshall, because I think that's probably too much detail. But I mean, Gwynham, as far as I know, there are no cuts.
It would be something that you could refer to place scrutiny to actually have a look at.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be anything.
You're on the town council as well, aren't you, David? So yes, I mean that might well
According to the report, we're actually spending 60 grand more than we were.
Yeah. So I think that's probably a conversation for the town council and perhaps the scrutiny, but we're certainly not cutting any money. I'll ask Richard Marshall. Roger.
I've had information that in both Shrewsbury and Ludlow, the street cleansing at a weekend is being reduced, and it's a subcontractor to Kier who is actually providing this. So I'm not sure where it's coming from. The officers need to be asked, why is it happening? Because there are numbers of complaints that are starting to appear.
Right. Take that on board, Roger. I am aware that there is far more subcontracting of minor contracts from Kier down to local subcontractors to keep the Shropshire pound in Shropshire, which I actually fully promote, because a lot of these are agricultural subcontractors and it helps the rural economy. Again, I can't comment for Richard Marshall, but...
No, I think it's worth asking the question. Yeah. Because we're certainly not paying Kier any less. Julia? Yeah, well, supposedly, but not if they're doing less.
Just on that, I think it's a really important question. We all want to see local contractors get the work. In some cases, that might even be town council DLOs, and that's really welcome. But what we're hearing from the streetlight problem is that actually the oversight and the scrutiny of the contractor seems to be a little bit woolly. And I wonder if there's a piece of work there which is just looking at, what is the mechanism to hold subcontractors to account? We've got these street lights that haven't been working for a year now, because when we ask the system asks Kier and Kier asks, and so on. And how do we join up that scrutiny a bit better?
Yeah.
Is there a piece of work there that we could...
Yeah, so that could be for Joyce's work programme. I know what I'm hearing, because I've had similar issues, is that they've been unable to source the new LED, that's the big issue. But certainly that is something that Joyce could probably put on her work programme. I'm quite aware of time, and we are having people running in and out, seeing what we're doing. So have we got any more questions on item 10? Is everyone happy to accept the report? And can I just say, Gwynham, thank you so much. I really do enjoy you coming along. Obviously, thank you to James and Helen as well. But thank you very much, Gwynham. I think it's really helpful when the portfolio holder comes along and takes part. Thank you. Pardon? No. Yes, thank you. Yeah, you better go, Gwynham, because you've got cabinet in a minute. And James, if you want to slip off. Poor Amanda, poor Amanda's at cabinet as well. So the work programme. So I did have a word with Roger about the work programme, and there's every possibility that there will be changes to scrutiny in May. So I wonder whether that the work programme ought to be done when the new scrutiny, whatever it is, layout is in place. But I'm quite happy to.
I think it needs to be looked at by, hopefully, when the chairmen are elected in May, and the vice chairman, wherever they are, that come forward and then be circulated, maybe a number of questions to the members on the new committees or the old committees, whichever, to see what their priorities are, so that reports and agendas can be set up then.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Tom's just,
I was only going to say that I guess it's an extension of what Roger's just said. Absolutely, as we head into the new scrutiny committees potentially and those arrangements, what I would like to do, and I've set out a proposal and this needs to be worked through now and looked at, is with health and adult social care scrutiny last year, we did two workshop sessions.
Yeah.
The first one is about what are the topics, So that involves the relevant directors, portfolio holders, assistant directors. It's tying that back into things like the Shropshire Plan delivery. It's making sure that we've got a clear focus on that. The second session then is, okay, if we prioritise those in the first session, we've got that down to a focused set of topics. Of those, what do we need to understand? Who do we need to hear from to understand it? What do we need to receive to do that? And then if we're tying this back into the plans that we've got as an organisation, when do we need to do that so that we're informing a decision-making process, or it's following a decision-making process so that you as a committee, or any committee, is looking at the impact and the progress that's been made in taking something forward. So absolutely listening to what's been said around the work programme today, and when we need to put different topics in. I think as those topics are identified, we will go through a process of prioritisation. What value will Scrutiny add by looking at it? But also, I think listening again to some of the topics which have been made, there's a consideration in those workshops about which ones of those would be best as a briefing to start with. And then if there are issues which are specific that come out of those, then we can think about scoping a piece of work that might be added to the relevant committee's work programme. But I guess it's just being smart about how we go forward, and we cut our cloth.
And I welcome that, because I think it gives us more opportunity to actually have a good shakeout and see what we actually want to do. So I'm quite happy about that. And I think if it involves everybody, then everyone has the opportunity to chip in. So is everyone happy about that? Okie dokie. Item number 12, exclusion of the press and public. So can you take us off live? And
Is that agreed by the committee?
Sorry, is everyone happy? We'll go. Let us know.